Chapter 1135. After finishing a bowl of delicious Yangzhou fried rice and a bowl of sweet tofu pudding, Bonnie licked her lips, and her gaze landed on the remaining Ruggiamo next to Vesenio's hand. How can she eat so fast? Vesenio was shocked. He wasn't even halfway through his second Ruggiamo. He slowly turned his body to block Bonnie's view and took another big bite of the Ruggiamo. He had to finish it quickly. Honey, it seems that you can't finish it. Let me help you with the last one. A hand came close to his body and grabbed the Ruggiamo. No. Vesenio was shocked. He stared at the hand that grabbed the Ruggiamo slowly retracted. He forced himself to look at Bonnie calmly and said, Honey, this Ruggiamo is really not suitable for you. Why don't you have ice cream? It's also super delicious. No, I have to try this Ruggiamo today. Bonnie shook her head. Then, she took a bite of the Ruggiamo under Vesenio's gradually widening eyes. Crunch. The crispy skin made a light crisp sound, and the braised meat juices in the middle of the soft and sweet baiji bread splashed everywhere. Unlike the refreshing taste of the Yangzhou fried rice, this meat juices were full and domineering. It was as if a ladle of water had been splashed on boiling oil, and the taste buds were instantly activated. What was even more incredible was that after swallowing, the deliciousness bloomed in the mouth and turned into a fiery aura that wreaked havoc in the body. It was as if a little monster had entered the body, causing the entire person to become restless and hot. Bonnie's lips parted slightly, and she let out a moan of ecstasy with a slightly red face. At the same time, there was a crisp sound of cloth tearing. Bonnie's clothes were torn open, and her full breasts were almost exposed. Oh! This feeling is simply too wonderful. Bonnie wasn't aware of this at all. Her mind was only filled with this thought. After the initial stimulation of the heat in her body disappeared, she didn't feel uncomfortable. Instead, she felt warm and numb. The exhaustion from last night's and this morning's battle instantly disappeared. She even felt like she could fight another 300 rounds. It's over. Vesenio reached out to block Bonnie's exposed chest. His mind was completely blank. He was finished today. Bonnie opened her eyes and looked at Vesenio coquettishly. She punched his chest with her little fist and said coquettishly, Hubby, you're so naughty. How could you hide such a good thing for yourself to eat? Vesenio wanted to cry. I'll deal with you when we get back. Bonnie licked her lips and continued eating the Ruggiamo in her hand. I didn't expect that such a decent-looking restaurant would actually sell this kind of medicine, and it's so delicious. This boss is really a genius. Bonnie looked in the direction of the kitchen. No wonder her husband was getting better and better. It turned out that he came here every day to cheer her on. Vesenio finished the 2 Ruggiamos with a dumbfounded expression, paid the bill, and followed Bonnie out of the restaurant in a daze. Honey, listen to me. The sun is shining brightly today. Why don't we? Vesenio said seriously after getting on the carriage. Why don't we play something more exciting? We haven't tried it on a moving carriage yet. Bonnie smiled wickedly. She was already on top of him. Her soft and familiar hands unbuttoned his clothes, and she took off her clothes while she was at it. The coachman felt the unusual shaking of the carriage and some strange noises. He looked down and continued to drive the carriage calmly. You want me to be the judge for the challenge? In the Food Association building, Robert looked at Sith in surprise. Sith nodded. Yes. Mr. Meg has already accepted my challenge, so I would like to invite you to be the main judge for this duel. The second place on the soup rankings was challenging the first place on the soup rankings. This was the first duel after the launch of the delicious cuisine rankings. This delicious cuisine rankings caused a huge commotion at the beginning because Mamie's dominated the 6 rankings. However, most of them were negative reviews and negative comments about the delicious cuisine rankings. However, as time passed, this sincere ranking still won the approval of the customers with one delicious dish after another. Even for Mamie Restaurant, which was the most controversial restaurant in the city, after more and more customers tried it for themselves and word of mouth spread, it completely reversed its reputation, and was basically confirmed as the #1 restaurant in Chaos City. However, although Mamie's was good at everything, its soup was indeed a little weak. Robert could be considered a regular at Mamie's. He had tried the braised chicken and rice a few times, so there was no need to talk about the taste. The soup was also very delicious. However, to call it a soup, it was indeed a little difficult to say that there was only enough soup for the rice. Sith Restaurant's freshwater seafood soup was indeed one of the best soups. Robert often went there to try it. Robert pondered for a while, and then nodded. Since that's the case, I agree to be the judge for this soup duel. Delicacies needed innovation. Only then could they bring more delicious food to the diners and enrich the cuisine. Appropriate competition could also promote innovation. It was undeniable that Mr. Mack was indeed a genius. Every dish had a bold and imaginative idea. His revolutionary cooking method brought a fresh feeling to the entire food and beverage industry. Since both parties had agreed, he might be able to encourage the chefs to go on the path of innovation by attending the event as the president of the Food Association. Sith's face lit up, and he quickly said, "Thank you, then. The duel will be at 4:30 p.m. today at the entrance of Mamie's." After leaving the Food Association, Sith went to visit the sharp-tongued critic, Fabid. "What? You want a duel with Mr. Mack?" Fabid, who was writing his script, looked up at Sith as if he was an idiot. "Is your face itching?" "Mr. Fabid," Sith wanted to explain. "All right. Anyway, I have nothing to do in the afternoon. I was planning to go to Mamie's for dinner, so I'll be the judge while I'm at it." Fabid interrupted Sith and continued to write his script. "Go out. I need to work." "Thank you." Sith turned and left. Although he knew Fabid's character was like that, he still felt a little bloodthirsty after being mocked like that. "My freshwater seafood soup will never lose to anyone," Sith said to himself with confidence as he clenched his fists. Sith then went to look for 3 slightly famous gourmets in Chaos City, and invited them to be the judges for the duel. He then returned to the restaurant to prepare for the duel. It was just past 4 p.m., and there was already a crowd outside Mamie's. However, there was only a stove and a brownish-black wine jar at the entrance of the restaurant. Chapter 1136. Is this the soup that the boss of Mamie's is going to use for the duel? Why isn't anyone watching it? Isn't it too casual? Yeah. I specially came here to cheer for Sith Restaurant's freshwater seafood soup. It's the #1 soup in my heart. It's irreplaceable. I heard that this boss is going to use a new dish to duel with Boss Sith. He's really full of confidence. There's no fragrance at all. Could it be that it's boiled water? Many of the onlookers had heard about the duel and rushed over to watch the show. At this moment, the restaurant's door was closed and not a single person could be seen. There was a stove at the entrance, and a wine jar was boiling on top of it. The onlookers were also discussing in low voices to pass the time before the duel began. The restaurant's regulars were rather calm. Although not many people tasted the Buddha jumps over the wall yesterday, the fragrance that successfully lured the prisoners from the neighboring prison to break out, and the scene that caused the city lord, the lord of the city, and the warden to appear at the same time was still lingering in their minds. Please make way. Sith Restaurant is here. Right at this moment, a horse-drawn carriage drove over, and the bald man shouted loudly from the carriage. Everyone made way, and the horse-drawn carriage stopped at the restaurant's door. Sith walked out of the horse-drawn carriage, and was stunned when he saw the wine jar at the door. Could this be the soup that Meg was going to use to duel with him? This was the first time he had seen such a cooking vessel. Ha! He's just using some weird things to attract attention. The bald man sneered, and started to move all the kitchenware from the carriage with the staff. Soon, a very professional stove was set up in front of Mamie's. There were pots, bowls, ladles, basins, all kinds of knives, and kitchenware. That's right. That's what a professional chef is like. What's the big deal about setting up a jar here? Everyone's interest was piqued when they saw how the people from Sith restaurant worked. Cooking wasn't a rare thing, but cooking well was something that required a lot of skill. The same kitchenware, the same ingredients, and even the same steps, but the food made by different people would have a completely different taste. Because Sith restaurant was ranked number 2 on the soup rankings, it had jumped from a small restaurant to a new restaurant in Chaos City. The delicious freshwater seafood soup was famous. How was it made? It really made people curious. Sith glanced at the tightly shut restaurant door and withdrew his gaze. He began to check if all the kitchen utensils and condiments were prepared. He turned to the bald man and asked, "Are the ingredients ready?" "I've already informed them. They should be on their way here. Old Joseph always fishes in the cleanest waters outside the city. The quality is the best." The bald man nodded. "Boss Sith, I've brought the fish and prawns you asked for." At this moment, a voice came from outside. The crowd opened up a path, and a white-haired old man with his sleeves rolled up walked in with a wooden bucket. He placed the bucket on the ground and heaved a sigh of relief. The wooden barrel was half filled with clear water. Shrimps and small fishes were swimming happily in the water, and there were more than a dozen clams at the bottom. Wow, the water is so clean, and the freshwater fish are so fresh. Did they just come up from the river? Only freshly caught freshwater fish would be so energetic. Sith restaurant really uses the freshest ingredients. You can see how fresh and clean they are. No wonder the soup is so delicious every time. People came forward to take a look and couldn't help but praise. Old Joseph, thank you for your hard work. Sith looked at the freshwater fish in the wooden barrel and revealed a satisfied smile. The quality of Old Joseph's goods had always been the best, and this time was no exception. The bald man gave the money to Old Joseph, then carefully poured the fish and prawns in the wooden barrel into the prepared wooden basin. The stove was set up, and the ingredients were ready. Sith glanced at the time. There were still about 10 minutes to the agreed time. "Oh, is everything ready?" Robert walked in from the crowd and saw that everything was ready. His gaze landed on the wine jar at the door, and he couldn't help but be stunned. What was Mr. Mac trying to do? There are quite a lot of people. Are you afraid that no one will know if you lose? Febit squeezed through the crowd with some difficulty. He tidied his clothes and said with a displeased expression. A middle-aged woman wearing a white mink coat walked in with a smile, and said, "The battle between the first and second place on the soup rankings. It's really a battle that I look forward to." Old Master Avis walked in with a smile, and greeted Robert. "Yes, I heard that Mr. Meg has a new creation. I'm really looking forward to it." A young man in a blue robe walked in with a smile, and said, "All the seniors are here. It makes me seem very out of place. Boss Sith, you didn't tell me in advance. Otherwise, how would I dare to show off in front of all the seniors? Wow, what a luxurious lineup of judges. Mr. Robert, the president of the Food Association, Mr. Febid, the sharp-tongued food critic, Candace, who just came back from Rodu, the former head chef of Reed's Roast Pig, Old Master Avis, and Randy, who just became a special columnist for the Carnivorous magazine. This lineup, is really invincible. The surrounding crowd looked at the 5 people who came in one after another, and were all shocked. They didn't expect such a high-level judge to be invited for a battle like this. It seemed like Boss Sith really wanted to decide the result of this battle with authority. Robert looked at his watch and doubtfully said, "It's almost time. Mr. Mac hasn't come out yet." Candace looked at the tightly shut restaurant door, and said with a smile, "Seems like the owner of this restaurant is a little arrogant. The judges are already here, but he still hasn't come out." Ding! Right at this moment, the restaurant door opened outwards, and Meg, who was wearing a chef's uniform, walked out. He was a little surprised to see so many people crowding around the restaurant door. Then, his gaze landed on Robert and the others standing in front of the restaurant. He smiled and said, "These are the judges for today, right?" "Yes, Mr. Mac. The judges are here, and the battle is about to start. Please provide seats for the judges," Sith said to Meg. "It's my duty." Meg smiled at the bald man who was standing at the side with a look of disdain, and said, "The waitresses in my restaurant are all weak girls. Then, I'll have to trouble this strong man to help me move the tables and chairs." "Me?" The bald man was stunned, and wanted to refute. "Move it. The battle is about to start," Sith said. "Yes." The bald man swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. He called 2 waiters to put the tables together at the door, and set up the judges' table. All the judges took their seats. Robert sat in the middle, and looked at Meg and Sith, and said, "Mr. Mac and Boss Sith are both great chefs with superb culinary skills. Today, we will be having a culinary battle with soup. The 5 of us will be the judges, and the winner will be decided by voting. Does either side have any objections?" Chapter 1137. No objections. Meg nodded. Sith was indeed an upright person. The judges he found were all reputable figures, so they wouldn't be too biased. No objections. Sith nodded as well. Robert raised his hand to look at his watch, and then said, "All right, according to your agreement, this culinary duel will officially begin in 3 minutes. Both parties, please get ready." Sith returned to the front of the stove and began the final preparations. The waiters and chefs of Sith restaurant were also very nervous. After all, this concerned the reputation and future of Sith restaurant. Success or failure depended on this. In contrast to the nervousness of the people at Sith restaurant, it was a different scene at Mamie's. "Boss, please take a seat." Yabamiya moved a chair over, placed it beside the stove, and stood behind the chair. "Thank you." Meg nodded slightly and sat down beside the warm stove. He crossed his legs and squinted his eyes casually. This stove was quite comfortable to roast in, and there was a light aroma of charcoal and fruits. The Buddha jumps over the wall only needed to be simmered on the stove, and it would be ready when the time was up. Hence, all he had to do now was to wait. Elizabeth and the others also stood behind Meg in a neat row with relaxed expressions. Amy moved a small stool, and sat beside Meg's feet with Ugly Duckling in her arms. She raised her little hand and tried to stretch Ugly Duckling towards the stove. Ugly Duckling was so scared that it hugged her little hand tightly and refused to let go, causing her to laugh happily. Anna stood at the side and carefully grabbed Ugly Duckling's swaying tail to prevent it from really flinging its tail into the stove. If that happened, it would really become very ugly. I say, is this really a proper culinary duel? Why do I feel that the boss and employees of Mamie's are here to watch the show? This boss is quite honest. These waitresses are too beautiful, aren't they? They are really winners in life. But those 2 Lolas are too cute, aren't they? Ah, that kitten is so pitiful. Please change it to me. Outside Amy's, there were no less than 500 onlookers. Most of them were waiting in line to eat, while the rest were there to watch the show after hearing about the duel. However, everyone was rather surprised to see Amy and the others. Of course, most of them were looking at Amy, who was playing with Ugly Duckling, and Anna, who was standing off to the side. The cute little Lolita paired with the cute round kitten really made people unable to take their eyes off of them. The women standing behind Meg in a neat row also made people's eyes light up. They looked at Meg with eyes full of envy and jealousy. Because his performance was too leisurely, it even gave people the illusion that they were the real spectators. But he was clearly the main character of this duel, wasn't he? Candace looked at Meg, who was crossing his legs, and said with a displeased expression, "This head chef of Mamie's is quite ostentatious. The duel is about to start, and not only is he not preparing, he even set up a chair for himself." In order to be known as the queen of cookery in Rodu, Candace had put in much more effort than any man. Step by step, she walked out of the doubt and ridicule, and became one of the top 10 chefs in Rodu with influence. As a person of action, she couldn't stand those frivolous chefs. These fellows usually had more temper than ability, and couldn't achieve much. And now, Meg's performance was arrogance and disdain for this duel in her eyes. This was a very frivolous performance. Has he already given up on this duel? Avis also showed a hint of doubt as he looked at Meg, puzzled. "I think this boss is an interesting person. He's someone who knows how to enjoy life," Randy said with a smile. A smile appeared on Randy's face. His gaze landed on the 4 waitresses with different styles standing behind Meg, and his smile became even more radiant. Dining in this restaurant must be a delightful experience for the eyes. Sith glanced at the leisurely Meg, and his gaze landed on the wine jar on the stove at the side. Meg had told him before that the soup he was going to make would take a long time to cook, so he would start cooking in advance. He had already informed him of this in advance. It seemed like this jar contained the soup he was going to use to duel with him today. He only knows how to put on an act. "Let's see if he can still sleep when he loses," the bald man mumbled softly as he looked at Meg unhappily. "Change the water and get ready to cook," Sid said calmly as he retracted his gaze. He was faintly uneasy. Although he was very confident in his ancestral freshwater seafood soup, he suddenly felt uncertain when he saw Meg's relaxed expression. What is this new product that this fellow is launching? Is it really better than the braised chicken soup from before? Mr. Meg is a humble and polite person. He's also a chef who treasures cooking. Boss Sith told me before that the soup Mr. Meg is going to cook would take a long time, so he would start cooking in advance. This is something that both parties have no objections to, Robert explained with a smile. Candace smiled coldly, and said with slight mockery, since the timing is not equal, then this is not a fair duel. I've never heard of such a strange duel of culinary skills. Who can guarantee that this soup was made by him? Then what's the point of this duel? Isn't this too unfair? Boss Sith hasn't started cooking yet, and that boss has already started cooking. Who knows who made this pot of soup? Maybe it was made by someone else. The culinary queen really saw the problem with one look. Candace's speech stirred up the enthusiasm and curiosity of the spectators. They all started to find loopholes and construct conspiracy theories. These fellows, how can they talk nonsense? This was clearly made by the boss alone. Yabamiya looked at Candace with some annoyance. This woman was a judge. If she stood on Sith's side before watching the duel, that would be terrible. Mamie's regulars were all unhappy when they heard that. Mr. Mac looking for someone else to cook for him. This is probably the funniest joke I've heard this year, right? Harrison could not help but laugh. His words also caused the regulars of Mamie's to burst into laughter. Sitting by the fire, Meg, who was so comfortable that he almost fell asleep, opened his eyes. He looked at Candace with a smile, and said, "Madam, before you understand the situation, I suggest you watch your words." This duel was initiated by Boss Sith. He proposed the format and theme of the duel. I set the time and place, and clearly told the other party that the soup I'm cooking will take more than 5 hours. In order not to waste everyone's time, I will start cooking in advance. As for inviting someone else to cook for me, please be clear-headed. This is a duel between the first and second place of the soup leaderboard, and Mamie's is first. May I ask, which chef should I invite to cook this pot of soup on my behalf to face this duel where the honor of a chef is at stake? Chapter 1138. The chattering stopped in an instant, and there was silence at the entrance of Mamie's restaurant. The onlookers who were discussing the unfairness of the competition and how Mamie might have cheated shut their mouths one by one, feeling their faces burning. Candace was stunned for a moment. Meg's words were like a loud slap to her face, mocking her intelligence without hiding it. The anger in her heart burned fiercely. But as he said, since this was a duel between the first and second place, if he could find a chef better than Sith to replace him, then Sith would still not be first place. And the rules of the culinary duel were that as long as both parties agreed, then it would be established. In this aspect, Meg did not leave any loopholes. Candace was angry, but she could not vent it. Her wrinkled face was red with anger. She looked at the wine jar and sneered, "I have been cooking for 40 years, and I have never heard of a soup that takes more than 5 hours to cook. Even the tendons of magical beasts don't take that long to cook." Meg smiled, and said, "It's okay. Maybe you don't understand what kind of soup takes more than 5 hours to cook, and you have never tried the deliciousness of a soup made by boiling bones over low heat for a few hours. But if a chef uses his own experience to casually mock the cooking methods of other chefs, it does not make him appear knowledgeable and authoritative. There are many things you have never heard of. You." Candace was so angry that her whole body trembled. As a senior in the culinary world, chefs were usually very respectful when they saw her. She had agreed to be the judge of this duel just now because she saw that Sith's attitude was sincere enough. She did not expect to be mocked by a young junior. Meg ignored Candace and turned to look at Robert. "It's time for the duel. Considering that Boss Sith's time is tight, let's start the duel first." "Okay, let the duel officially begin." Robert nodded and ended this quarrel that had arisen out of nowhere. "Madam Candace, calm down. Let's focus on the duel first." Robert turned to look at Candace, who was sitting beside him, and comforted her softly. "Humph, this kind of ungentlemanly fellow will definitely not be able to cook any delicious food." Candace snorted coldly. She had already made up her mind. No matter what soup Meg made, she would definitely vote for Sith. After returning to Chaos City, the only meal she'd had outside was the freshwater seafood soup at Sith restaurant. It had indeed given her quite a pleasant surprise. Even in Rodu, just the soup alone was enough to rank in the top 10. This boss is quite impressive. His sharp-tongued style is sharp enough, yet it doesn't lose the elegance of a gentleman. He kills without leaving a trace and chokes people to death without paying for it. Randy looked at Meg in awe. He was really a genius. He hadn't handed in the draft for this month's Mediterraneanism column yet. He had been cooped up at home for a month, and even after scratching his head, he still couldn't find any ideas. Today, he agreed to be a judge for Boss Sith because he wanted to go out to find some inspiration. At the same time, he also planned to check the meat rankings on the gourmet cuisine rankings. He only found out today that the gourmet cuisine rankings had changed. This guy, is he trying to steal my rice bowl? Febid looked at Meg with more scrutiny and a sense of danger. Such a sharp rebuke made him feel as though he had met a kindred spirit. Mr. Mac is indeed Mr. Mac. The dishes are delicious, and the words he says are so nice. Ha ha ha. I have already become Mr. Mac's little fangirl. The regulars at Mamie's cheered up after Meg tore Candace apart with his bare hands. They were all so full of confidence. This guy is even going against the judges. Looks like we're definitely going to win today. The bald man was secretly delighted. There was no need to worry. Candace's vote already belonged to Sith Restaurant. Sith took a deep look at Meg, and his mood became even more serious. He retracted his gaze, and took a deep breath to calm himself down. He took out a pair of scissors and started to cut the fish and prawns that were still alive, and started to cook the freshwater seafood soup. Seeing that Candace didn't say anything, Meg also closed his eyes again. After a while, he opened his eyes again, and turned to the ladies. Are you all hungry? Why don't we eat first? Ha! The ladies were all stunned. Let's eat. Amy, who was playing with Ugly Duckling with Anna, suddenly stood up, and nodded her little head. Me. Father, I want to eat. Anyway, there's still half an hour. Let's eat first. We'll be opening soon. It's not good to work on an empty stomach. Meg nodded, got up, and walked into the restaurant. The ladies also followed him into the restaurant. This is too showy, isn't it? Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw the people from Mamie's leave in a group to eat. Arrogant. Absolutely arrogant. Candace said coldly. She had never heard of a contestant who left the judges to the side and went to eat by himself. Yeah, he didn't even bring us along. It's really too despicable. Febit stretched out his head, and shouted at Meg's back. Mr. Mac, bring me along. It's not opening hours yet. Please line up. Meg's calm voice sounded. The door closed slowly, leaving behind a crowd of shocked gazes. The dishes were already prepared. Mia and the others went into the kitchen to bring them out. Everyone sat down and started eating. Boss, is this a good idea? Will they all vote for that person because of this? Mia said worriedly. It's okay. The duel is a small matter. There's no need to affect our normal meals and business because of this. Meg put a piece of fish into Amy's bowl, and continued eating. There might be more and more such challenges in the future, but Meg had already decided to reject such meaningless duels. Instead of wasting time and energy on such things, he would rather play with Amy. Outside the restaurant, hundreds of people were watching a strange cooking duel. On one side, in front of a professional stove, Boss Sith was skillfully killing the fish and removing the shrimp lines. A pot of freshwater seafood soup with a strong aroma attracted the audience's exclamations. On the other side, there was a stove all by itself. On top of the stove was a large brown wine jar. There was no viewing experience at all. What is this? Is this a one-man show? A confused passerby poked his head in to watch for a while and asked curiously. I guess so. A passerby who had been watching for a long time nodded. He still could not understand this mysterious duel. Many people even thought that the boss of Amy's had given up on this duel. As time passed, Sith lifted the lid of the soup pot. The rich and fresh aroma immediately spread out. The boiling milky white soup was sprinkled with a handful of green onions. He turned off the fire and scooped out the soup. Bowls of steaming freshwater seafood soup were served in front of the 5 judges. It smells so good. Everyone's eyes were attracted to the bowls of freshwater seafood soup. Ding! At this moment, the bell hanging on the door of the restaurant made a crisp sound. The door opened, and Meg walked out with a calm expression. Calm. Wonderful bookhouse. Calm. Chapter 1139. Watching the process of a chef's cooking had a wonderful effect. When the lid was lifted, the aroma satisfied all the audience's imaginations. Although they did not taste it, they seemed to be certain that it was a very delicious and tempting taste. At that moment, the audience and the 5 judges felt this way. The milky white freshwater seafood soup emitted a tempting fresh aroma. The fresh taste of the fresh fish and shrimp was completely stimulated by the secret seasoning. It was pleasantly surprising and satisfying. The crisp sound of the bell woke everyone up. Everyone looked at Meg, who walked out of the restaurant. Because he went to eat halfway, they almost forgot that this was a cooking competition. Looks like Boss Sith's freshwater seafood soup is done. Meg glanced at the big bowl of freshwater seafood soup in front of the judges and then looked at the audience's expression. His way of leaving to eat did not seem to be very popular. This boss's behavior is really rude. Yeah, first he insulted the judges, then he left to eat halfway through the competition. Now Boss Sith's freshwater seafood soup is in front of the judges. What does he have to compete with him? Yeah, the aroma of this freshwater seafood soup is too tempting. Pure wild freshwater seafood with fresh ingredients. I've decided to go to Sith restaurant to have a bowl of freshwater seafood soup later. The audience discussed softly. They did not think that Meg could win. Mr. Mac, this bowl is for you. Sith walked over with a bowl of fish soup and handed it to Meg. Meg glanced at Sith. It looked like this person was really confident in his freshwater seafood soup. Was he planning to make him admit defeat? If that was the case, then wouldn't he have to return the favor with a bowl? Wouldn't that be too cruel? Meg showed a hint of hesitation. I think, no matter the result, it should be acknowledged by the other party, Sith said with a smile. Meg reached out to take the bowl of fish soup and nodded with a smile. Boss Sith is right. However, my soup is also coming out of the pot. Let's drink together later. As he said that, he carefully put the bowl of fish soup on the table at the side. This freshwater seafood soup is milky white in color. It's thick but not thick. It perfectly stimulates the freshwater seafood's taste and blends them into this pot of soup. It's really the best soup. Candace lowered his head and sniffed. He then picked up the spoon and scooped up a spoonful of freshwater seafood soup. He gently blew on it a few times before putting it into his mouth. The warm freshwater seafood soup had a warm texture. Although it was not Candace's first time tasting it, he still could not help but praise. The freshness of the freshwater fish, the softness of the clams, the deliciousness of the river prawns. All in one mouthful of soup perfectly. Yet, it has a unique taste. And surprise. It's really delicious. Wow, the legendary cold-faced cooking queen actually gave such a high evaluation. Looks like Boss Sith is really going to win this time, someone exclaimed softly. Febit picked up his spoon and drank a spoonful of soup. He savored the taste for a while before nodding slightly. The soup is a little bland, and the seasoning is still lacking. However, it does have its own uniqueness when it comes to stimulating the taste of the ingredients. In terms of freshwater seafood alone, no one in Chaos City can beat it. It can be considered a good soup. The gourmet Febid, who is known for his sharp tongue, actually gave Boss Sith such a high evaluation. Seems like this vote is in the bag. The bald man mumbled to himself excitedly as if he could already see the light of victory. Boss Sith's culinary skills are as stable as usual. This bowl of freshwater seafood soup is really something I can't get tired of. Although the fish and prawns in winter are not as plump as in autumn, the texture is clearer and has a different taste. It's a good soup. Robert also nodded and praised after drinking a few mouthfuls of soup. Old Master Avis drank a few mouthfuls of soup, and smiled at Sith. The best freshwater seafood soup in Rodu is the freshwater seafood soup from Roosevelt Restaurant. It was once awarded the best dish in the Roth Empire's palace banquet. This freshwater seafood soup made by head chef Sith is already 80% standard. If he makes some improvements to the side dishes and condiments, it's not impossible for it to surpass Roosevelt Restaurant's freshwater seafood soup one day. The president and Old Master Avis also gave him very high praises. For judges have already expressed their approval for him. Is the result of this duel already out? Everyone turned to look at Randy. How would this young food critic rate this freshwater seafood soup? This won't do. These judges seem to be very satisfied with this bowl of freshwater seafood soup. Is Mr. Mack really going to lose? The regulars at Mamie's also had a tinge of nervousness on their faces. Although they were very confident in Mr. Mack's culinary skills, it seemed like he was also an opponent that could not be underestimated. Boss should win, right? Mia clenched her fists nervously. Although Meg had never lost before, the current situation was really too nerve-wracking. Don't worry. Father is super awesome. He will definitely win, Amy said confidently as she looked at Meg, who was lowering the temperature of the stove. Yes. Uncle Meg is the best chef. Anna nodded her little head, and looked at Meg with admiration in her eyes. I'll be proud if you praise me like this. Meg turned to look at the two little ones with a smile. He was in a good mood as he put on a pair of gloves, and prepared to remove the lid. On the other side, Randy also picked up his chopsticks and smilingly said, "The seniors have all commented on the soup. As a carnivore who can't be happy without meat, I'll try the freshwater seafood in this soup first." As he said that, he picked up a small fish. Although it had been cooked in the soup for a long time, the fish meat did not fall apart, and still maintained the appearance of a whole fish. He put the small fish into a small bowl, and then picked up a piece of fish meat to put into his mouth. Because it was cooked in the soup, the taste of the fish meat is very bland. Also, it should have been cooked for too long, so the fish meat is a little dry. After that, he scooped a spoonful of soup, and then put a piece of fish meat into the soup, and put it into his mouth along with the soup. This is indeed much better. The soup is very rich, and makes up for the bland fish meat perfectly. Furthermore, this soup is richer and more delicious than I expected. If I were to only comment on the soup, it's indeed the most delicious soup I've ever had in Chaos City. Next, let's try the river prawns. Stir-fried river prawns are my favorite dish. I wonder how the river prawns in this soup taste. Let's tear off its head first, then squeeze out its intestines, and peel off its soft shell. Now, Mr. Mack has removed the lid. Right at this moment, someone suddenly exclaimed. A rich meaty aroma suddenly appeared, and then swept out in all directions like a wave. Everyone who was listening with relish couldn't help but look over. Chapter 1140. Oh my God! It smells so good. Everyone's gaze landed on the big wine jar on the stove at the entrance of the restaurant. The sealed jar had been opened, and the incredible aroma was coming from that jar. New thinking Chinese-style hands. If the freshwater seafood soup's aroma was tempting, then this aroma was amazing. It came from nothing with just the act of opening the lid. The rich aroma overflowed and almost instantly covered the freshwater seafood soup's aroma. Seafood, meat, mushrooms, and the faint aroma of wine. It was a wonderful combination, but it brought about an incredible aroma that made people fall into it immediately. The onlookers who were mocking earlier all shut their mouths and swallowed their saliva as they looked at the wine jar beside Meg. What's inside? Why is it giving off such a wonderful aroma? How can this be? The bald man opened his mouth wide. Although he didn't want to admit it, the aroma that kept entering his nose had destroyed most of his confidence. Is this Buddha jumps over the wall? The aroma is indeed above the freshwater seafood soup. However, soup is ultimately a competition of taste. Sith slowly clenched his fist and muttered to himself. His gaze was already a little nervous. This aroma. It's too outstanding. Randy forgot to put the peeled river prawns into his mouth. He opened his mouth slightly and unconsciously stretched his neck to look in the direction of the wine jar. This aroma, how is it possible? Candace, who was drinking soup with his head lowered, suddenly raised his head and looked at Meg in disbelief. Robert, Fabid, Avis, and the rest also stopped eating and looked in Meg's direction in shock. They were obviously shocked by the aroma. Boss, do you really want to use this small bowl? Isn't it too small? Yabamiya came forward with a stack of small bowls and asked softly. They're not paying. A small bowl is enough, Meg said softly without batting an eyelid. He took the small bowls and started scooping the soup. 6 small bowls of Buddha jumps over the wall were scooped up. There were 4 small pieces of ingredients in each bowl, and each bowl was different. Send it to the judges and Boss Sith. Meg put down the spoon and smiled at everyone. Buddha jumps over the wall. Please try it. Bowls of Buddha jumps over the wall soup were placed in front of the judges, and the last bowl was given to Sith. Meg picked up the bowl of freshwater seafood soup that Sith had passed to him earlier and gestured to him. Then, he scooped up a spoonful and took a sip. The taste was warm and fragrant. The freshness of freshwater seafood was perfectly unleashed, and there was no fishy smell at all. It was indeed a good bowl of soup, better than most chefs. Good soup. Meg gave Sith a thumbs up before putting the bowl aside. He was too full just now, and couldn't finish another bowl of soup. The corner of Sith's mouth twitched. He glanced at the bowl that Meg had put aside. He couldn't tell if Meg's words were sincere praise or just polite words. The bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall was placed in front of the judges. Compared to the big bowl of freshwater seafood soup, the small bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall seemed a little small. It was probably only about 1/5 of the freshwater seafood soup. Although the fragrance of this soup is tempting, isn't this boss too stingy? He actually only gave such a small bowl. A passerby couldn't help but complain. However, most people's gazes were focused on the 5 judges at this moment. Both sides had already presented the soup, and the winner of this battle was in the hands of the judges. This soup. How exactly is it made? Candace looked at the brown soup in the small bowl in front of her with a puzzled expression. There was a transparent shark's fin in the soup, a piece that seemed to be chicken, a piece that seemed to be some kind of fungus, and a piece of meat that she didn't know what it was. She had stayed in Rodu for more than 40 years, and most of the chefs were her friends. She had also tasted countless delicacies, but she had never seen a soup that was so invasive just by its fragrance. Furthermore, this kind of invasiveness didn't make her feel disgusted. Instead, she had the urge to surrender when she came into contact with it and let it face her directly. Of course, this kind of wording wasn't very appropriate, but this was how she felt now. The seemingly messy combination perfectly blended into an irresistible and wonderful fragrance. This was really too unbelievable. Soup had always been seen as a side dish on the dining table. However, if there was a table of dishes in front of her now, even if it was a palace banquet, the fragrance of this soup had already made it the absolute main character. Previously, Meg's arrogant behavior made her have a very bad impression of him, but this soup in front of her made her want to give it a try uncontrollably. As a fair judge, it's my duty to taste. Then, I'll force myself to give it a try. Candace convinced herself in her heart. Then, she picked up the spoon and scooped a spoonful of soup into her mouth. The delicious soup slowly seeped into her taste buds. Then, like a storm, it set off a crazy 30 octaves. The freshness of the seafood, the mellowness of the meat, the freshness of the fungus. All kinds of flavors appeared one by one, and played an intoxicating symphony on the tip of the tongue. Oh! What an incredible taste! How did the taste of so many ingredients fuse into such a small mouthful of soup? Not only is it not abrupt at all, but the rich layering is addictive. This is simply a master-level cooking skill. It's amazing. After swallowing the soup, Candace couldn't help but praise. As soon as the words left her mouth, she felt that it was a little inappropriate. However, looking at the wonderful bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall in front of her, she really couldn't say anything against her will. That would be blasphemy to her belief and the career that she had persevered for decades. The surrounding crowd was silent for a while, and all of them were surprised. The culinary queen was bluntly criticized by Meg before. Now, she was praising Meg's Buddha jumps over the wall. Wasn't this too unbelievable? Mr. Mac really never disappoints. Febide looked at the small bowl in front of him. His eyes were glistening with tears as he scooped up a spoonful of soup and put it into his mouth. In his career, he had experienced a Waterloo once. That was during the duel between Meg and Ricky. As an outstanding sharp-tongued critic, he could only complain that his boss was too stingy. That made him have a lot of doubts about his career. Because of that, he had stopped writing for a week. Then, he regrouped and decided to go to Amy's to pick a fight to regain his confidence. From that day onwards, every day was a Waterloo for him. The Waterloo felt good for a while, but it kept on going. Until now, he still could only conclude one thing: Mr. Mac was too stingy. It was really hopeless. The delicious soup swept through his taste buds. The rich layering of the dozens of ingredients was amazing, and the combination of the delicious taste was addictive. It was like wandering in a warm spring, so comfortable that he wanted to sleep. Sure enough, Mr. Mac is still too stingy. Febide opened his eyes and looked at the small bowl with tears streaming down his face. Whispers of the World. Chapter 1141. This must be the pinnacle of soups. An unsurpassable pinnacle, Febide praised as he sipped the soup carefully, afraid that he would spill a little. Mr. Febide, who is known for his sharp tongue, actually gave such an evaluation. That's unbelievable. Everyone was shocked when they heard that. Those who were familiar with Febide's style of food criticism found it even more unbelievable. See that? I told you Mr. Mac would definitely win. I tried that Buddha jumps over the wall with my own mouth last night. That taste. TSK, TSK. It's really memorable, Harrison said proudly to the crazed fan of the freshwater seafood soup beside him. The crazed fan, who had been feeling smug for a while, snorted coldly. He obviously felt guilty and said, "Humph. There are still 3 people. It's not certain who will win yet. Seems like Mr. Meg's new dish has made an outstanding innovation again." Robert's eyes lit up too. During this period of time, there had been a phenomenon of people imitating and learning from Mamie's cooking methods in Chaos City, and developing new dishes and delicacies. Chaos City's culinary world, which had stagnated for many years without any progress and innovation, was entering an era of blossoming flowers. Although there were no stunning and phenomenal delicacies yet, this phenomenon was very good. It was also full of surprises for the diners as they could discover more and more new dishes on the menu. A solo dance that led the trend of delicacies had never happened in the history of Chaos City, or even the history of the Norland continent. Mr. Meg might become a man who would go down in history because of his delicacies. He scooped a spoonful of soup into his mouth, and his eyes became brighter and brighter. The delicious soup was full of meatiness, but it was not greasy at all. The distinct layers were amazing. He wanted to analyze the flavors one by one, but there were simply too many of them. There were even some that he had never seen before. After swallowing the butted jumps over the wall, Robert smilingly said, "Seems like there will be a change in the next delicious cuisine rankings." Avis also drank a mouthful of soup. The scrumptiousness of the butted jumps over the wall bloomed in his mouth. It had a strong impact, and shocked him. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Avis looked at Meg and praised him in his heart. He had also placed Mamie's at the top of the meat rankings. Both the red braised pork and the Peking duck had shocked him greatly. Meg's culinary skills and unique culinary thinking had far surpassed the chefs of this era, including these old fellows who had been immersed in the kitchen for decades. If this soup appeared at the Roth Empire's King's Palace banquet, it would definitely be chosen as the best dish of the banquet. Mr. Meg's understanding and creativity in cooking is truly admirable, Avis praised sincerely as he looked at Meg. "You flatter me." Meg cupped his hands and said modestly, "President, are you saying that Mr. Max butted jumps over the wall is going to reach the top?" Old Master Avis just said that the freshwater seafood soup has a promising future, but now he's saying that Mr. Max butted jumps over the wall is the best dish at the palace banquet. Isn't the difference too obvious? Although the final vote hasn't been held yet, it seems like the tables have turned. Ha! Mr. Max's ability isn't for show. The onlookers discussed fervently. Sith held the small bowl in his hand with a pale face. "B-boss, we won't lose, right?" The bald man asked softly as he looked at Sith anxiously. He no longer looked as smug and confident as before. "It's an unexpectedly high evaluation. What's interesting is that the ingredients in each judge's bowl are different even though it's the same bowl of soup. Then, let's follow the rules just now. I'll try the meat in this soup first and see how it tastes." Randy put the previously peeled river prawns back into the freshwater seafood soup, and scooped out a piece of meat from the bowl with a spoon. "Looks like this is a piece of chicken. There's indeed a strong chicken broth taste in the soup. I wonder how this chicken will taste after being cooked for a long time." As Randy spoke, he put the cubed chicken into his mouth. The most important thing about cooking meat was the control of the fire. If it was cooked for too long, the meat would turn dry easily, or it would lose its original chewiness and taste because it was too soft. As an exquisite carnivore, Randy's requirements for meat were almost perverted. In order to find meat that he was satisfied with, he had once carried his backpack and traveled almost all over the Norland continent. This was also the reason why he could become the youngest columnist for Carnivore in just a year. Readers often said that his words had a soul. He was a true carnivore. According to his experience, meat that had been cooked for such a long time had already lost its taste and texture. He bit into the chicken, and it didn't have the mushy texture that he expected. Instead, it had the perfect amount of tenderness and smoothness. What was even more incredible was the rich meaty taste that came with it. It wasn't just the taste of the chicken. The aroma of wine, seafood, mushrooms, and all kinds of meat had merged together and permeated the chicken perfectly. There was flavor within flavor. It was mushy but not rotten when chewed, and the aftertaste was endless. Randy felt his scalp starting to go numb. This had completely overturned his understanding of meat. He had never seen food like this before. His taste buds were already going crazy as they welcomed this wonderful carnival. He almost chewed his tongue. After swallowing a piece of chicken, he felt like he hadn't had enough. "I can't find the words to describe this feeling anymore. Even compared to all the meats that I've tasted in the past, this meat can be ranked in the top 3. What's even more incredible is that I actually encountered it in a bowl of soup. This world is too crazy." Randy was full of admiration. He looked at Meg with a smile, and said, "I think I already know what to write for this month's column. Mr. Meg, I really have to thank you." "You're welcome." Meg nodded slightly. He couldn't stand these so-called food critics the most. He hoped that they would also become chefs in their next lives. Randy retracted his gaze, and scooped up a piece of transparent shark's fin with the spoon. After studying it for a while, he tried to put it into his mouth. The smooth shark's fin slid into his mouth almost instantly. The shark's fin that was soaked in soup had a very wonderful texture and a wonderful taste. It gave him a completely different experience from the chicken. The 5 judges were all carefully tasting the small bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall. The big bowl of freshwater seafood soup at the side was completely ignored. Ding! Febby's spoon was the first to touch the bottom. He raised his head and poured the last few drops of soup into his mouth. He put down the bowl and looked at Meg. Mr. Mac, another bowl. Calm. Wonderful book house. Calm. Chapter 1142. I want another bowl too. Randy put down his bowl and raised his hand as well. He added with a smile, "Can you give me a few more pieces of meat?" Candace put down her spoon and wiped her lips elegantly with a silk handkerchief. She glanced at Meg, and her throat moved. However, she held it in and didn't say anything. She was secretly anxious. If they can all have another bowl, I should have one too, right? Robert and Avis put down their bowls. Although they didn't say anything, their gazes were on Meg. Meg smiled and said, "I'm sorry. I only prepared this much for the judges. The rest is for the customers. If you still want to eat, you can line up and try it in the restaurant." "Mr. Mac, aren't you too stingy? There's still so much in that jar. Even a small bowl would be fine." Febby looked at Meg with some resentment, expressing his disdain for his stingy behavior. "Because the cost is higher, so..." Meg shrugged. His expression said everything. Then, he continued, "I think the bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall just now is enough for the judges to make a judgment for this duel. Forget it. I don't have high expectations for you. I'll order a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall." Febby sighed. A gourmet duel where the judges didn't even provide meals could only happen to Meg. However, every time he heard that there was Mr. Mac, he couldn't help but want to try it. This feeling was too sullen. This boss really has a personality. Randy wasn't annoyed. Instead, he looked at Meg with some interest. He raised his hand and said, "Then, I'll order a bowl in advance too. I'll go in and eat later." Robert raised his hand to signal for everyone to be quiet. Then, he said loudly, "All right. Since we've all tasted the soup made by Sith and Mr. Mac, it's time to make a judgment for this duel. Who will win in the end? I'm so nervous." "What's there to be nervous about? The advantage of Buddha jumps over the wall is too obvious." "That's not necessarily true. Didn't the culinary queen get scolded by the boss just now? Maybe she'll vote for Boss Sith." Although the surroundings were much quieter, there were still many people whispering. There was also a hint of anticipation and nervousness on the faces of the members of Amy's team. The final result was about to be revealed, and the victor would be decided. The bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall soup in Sith's hand hadn't been touched. Although his expression was still calm, his trembling hand that was holding onto the bowl showed that he wasn't calm at all. The bald man and the people from Sith restaurant all had very nervous expressions on their faces. They looked at Sith, then at the judges. If they lost this competition, then they would become laughingstocks. Mr. Meg's Buddha jumps over the wall really amazed me. It's hard to imagine that meat could be cooked so deliciously in a pot of soup. It completely subverted my understanding of cooking. Hence, I'm voting for Mr. Meg." Randy raised his hand and pointed at Meg. Boss Sith's freshwater seafood soup has always been making subtle improvements. This is very rare among chefs. Today's performance can be considered perfect. The taste of the soup is fresh and delicious. It's really a delicacy. Febide looked at Sith and praised. Then, he raised his hand and pointed at Meg. Hence, I'm voting for Mr. Mac. 2 votes. The expressions of the audience suddenly became nervous. According to the rules, the winner of the competition would be decided by the number of votes. Whoever got 3 votes first would be considered the winner. Candace coughed softly, and everyone's gaze fell on her. Before the competition started, she had a small argument with Meg. Everyone was curious whether this would be the turning point of this competition. Please. You must vote for Boss Sith. The bald man put his hands together and prayed sincerely. If he lost the competition, his plan to become the new branch manager would be completely ruined. Meg also looked at Candace. This old lady with a strong aura and the pride of a chef might go against her will and choose Sith. However, if that was the case, then he would be too disappointed in her. I really admire Sith's humility and diligence. Back then, his great-grandfather had brought me into the chef profession. At that time, the freshwater seafood soup he made was already very well received. When I returned to Chaos City this time, I specially went to try Sith's freshwater seafood soup. I was initially worried that after 3 generations, the heritage would be lost, and it would become ordinary. However, to my surprise, that didn't happen. Sith's freshwater seafood soup retained his grandfather's essence, but there were obvious improvements in the taste and details. This bowl of freshwater seafood soup has become a good soup that will leave its name in the world of chefs. Candace looked at Sith with a gratified smile on her face. Sith was slightly taken aback. Although he knew that his family had some connection with Candace, he didn't know that she had followed his great-grandfather into the family. After hearing her evaluation, he felt warmth in his heart. He found recognition for the career that he had been working on for his whole life. He bowed slightly, and said, "Thank you." Candace retracted her gaze, and looked at Meg. There was a hint of scrutiny in her eyes, and her voice became colder as she said, "I have never liked people who don't respect their elders. However, I can't deny that this butted jumps over the wall, that Mr. Meg made is indeed better than any soup that I have ever tasted. Furthermore, I might not be able to taste a soup that is better than this in the future. This vote comes from the sincerity of a chef. I will vote for him." "Thank you." Meg nodded slightly. He was a little surprised. He didn't expect that after playing the family card, she would vote for him. He was surprised by this move. 3 o'clock. The winner of the competition has been decided. The regulars at Amy's were already celebrating. The hardcore fans of Sith's restaurant didn't look too good. The restaurant and dish that they liked didn't win, so they were naturally in a bad mood. What should we do? The bald man had already lost his composure. He was the one who instigated Sith to come for this challenge. He thought that he would definitely win this duel, but he didn't expect to suffer such a crushing defeat. Mr. Meg's creativity and ability in cooking have already surpassed all the chefs that I have ever seen. He has a miraculous ability that is similar to a magic caster. Just like how I can't understand how to cook such a delicious soup by putting dozens of ingredients into a big pot like stewing. Avis looked at Meg with a smile, and said, "Although my vote doesn't affect the result, I will vote for Mr. Meg this time." Perhaps all the chefs in Rodu should be thankful that Mr. Meg didn't stay in the palace. Otherwise, there would be no suspense for the Best Dish Award in the future. Boss Sith and Mr. Meg are both extremely outstanding chefs in Chaos City. It is precisely because of chefs like you that the customers in Chaos City can eat more and more delicious food, Robert said as he pointed at Meg. Robert raised his hand and pointed at Mag. However, Mr. Mag's butted jumps over the wall is indeed better today. I will give my vote to Mr. Mag. Chapter 1143. 5:0 and Mr. Mac won in a crushing manner. Congratulations to Buddha Jumps Over the Wall for winning the first place on the soup rankings. The regulars at Amy's were not stingy with their applause as they celebrated this crushing victory. Although the victory was within their expectations, they still felt relieved after the result was confirmed. They all congratulated Meg. The onlookers also applauded. It was undeniable that this was an exciting duel. Is this Buddha Jumps Over the Wall really that delicious? Even I want to have a bowl of it. Why don't we eat here tonight? Sure. I've brought all my savings out today. I'll treat you guys to Buddha Jumps Over the Wall, a skinny man said generously, and his friends praised him. Then I'll probably be chopped up by your wife. Harrison looked at that man pitifully. It was the tragedy of a married man. It was still better for a single man like him to be free. The surroundings were noisy. Sith felt lost as he stared at the bowl of Buddha Jumps Over the Wall in his hand and fell into deep thought. The bald man and the staff of Sith's restaurant had already lost their backbone. They looked at Sith but did not dare to say anything. They had never thought that the freshwater seafood soup would suffer such a crushing defeat in the soup category. Meg smiled as he replied to the congratulations. He looked at Sith. He was probably the one who suffered the most in this duel. However, he did not know if he would sink because of this. There were not many good chefs in Chaos City. This boss Sith, who specialized in freshwater seafood soup, was one of them. Robert and the rest also looked at Sith with a hint of worry in their eyes. Most of the people who had reached the pinnacle of being a chef had their own pride. Whether Sith could accept his defeat in this duel might affect how far he could go on the path of being a chef. Sith was silent for a long time. Just as Robert was about to stand up and say something, he scooped a spoonful of soup into his mouth, and then closed his eyes. The warm soup, the aroma of wine, chicken, mushrooms, seafood. All kinds of flavors appeared one after another, and Sith's furrowed brows slowly relaxed. After a while, Sith opened his eyes and looked at Meg. He said, "Mr. Meg's soup is indeed better than the freshwater seafood soup. I admit defeat. Thank you for letting me win." Meg cupped his hands. "I think I'll come and challenge Mr. Meg again, but it might be many years later," Sith said with a smile. "Then I'll wait for Boss Sith." Meg also smiled. It seemed that not only was Boss Sith not dispirited, but he had also gained a new fighting spirit. This was a good thing. Sith finished the soup and meat in a few mouthfuls and passed the bowl to Mia. He then turned to the bald man and said, "Hand over 10,000 copper coins to Mr. Meg. Put the things away, I'll head back first." After he finished speaking, he bowed slightly to the judges and then turned to walk towards the carriage that was parked not far away. The bald man took out his money pouch and took out 10 dragon coins to give to Meg. He then instructed the waiters to put away the kitchen utensils and prepared to leave dejectedly. He no longer had the arrogance from before. "Wait, I'll have to trouble everyone to put the table back to its original position," Meg said with a smile as he put away the money and called out to everyone. "This guy. He's too much." The bald man clenched his teeth and looked at Meg. However, he still led the waiters to move the table back to its original position. After the duel ended, the crowd that was watching the show started to disperse. There were also many passers-by who were stunned by Meg's Buddha Jumps Over the Wall and joined the queue, wanting to try the highly praised delicacy. "Judges, thank you for your hard work. The restaurant is already open for business, so please forgive me for not being able to serve you," Meg said to the judges. He then turned around and walked up the stairs to open the restaurant's door. He looked at the customers who were still queuing up and smiled. "Welcome to Mamie's. Alright, let's queue up. We still have to make arrangements for today's Buddha Jumps Over the Wall." Otherwise, I will not be able to sleep tonight. Febid clapped his hands and consciously walked to the back of the queue. Senior Febid, it seems like you are a regular customer of Mamie's. Other than the Buddha jumps over the wall, do they have any other good meat dishes? Randy asked curiously as he caught up with Febid. Kid, are you trying to snatch my material? Febid turned around and looked at Randy with a scrutinizing look. Why would I? You and I have two completely different styles. Randy laughed out loud. He was getting more and more interested in this restaurant. It seemed like this was indeed a treasure restaurant. Febid nodded. After hesitating for a while, he couldn't help but say, that's true. Let me tell you, when it comes to meat, the first choice is naturally the red braised pork. Although the meat in the Buddha jumps over the wall tasted good, there was too little of it. It wasn't satisfying at all. However, the red braised pork is different. Since we are here, let's have dinner here before we leave, Robert said to Candace and Avis with a smile as he walked to the back of the queue. Candace, speaking of which, we haven't seen each other for a while. Let's have dinner together today, Avis said to Candace with a hint of uneasiness in his eyes. Ha, you are not worthy. Candace sneered and turned to leave. Seems like she still hasn't let go of what happened back then. Avis sighed as he watched Candace's carriage leave. He also turned to leave. The biggest impact of this duel on Mamie's was probably to promote the Buddha jumps over the wall and let everyone know how delicious the Buddha jumps over the wall was. 10,000 copper coins for a helping. This Buddha jumps over the wall is too expensive, 10,000 copper coins. That's equivalent to my salary for a month. I can't even save 10,000 copper coins a year. However, soon, some customers noticed the price on the menu and exclaimed. Some of them who were here for the first time got up and left quietly after looking at the menu. The price was too unreasonable. Ahem, ahem. Why don't we change to another restaurant? I think the freshwater seafood soup just now is pretty good. The skinny man who said he wanted to treat everyone to the Buddha jumps over the wall, coughed awkwardly and turned to walk out. Okay. Let's change to another restaurant. Otherwise, if sister-in-law finds out, you won't be able to leave in the future. The people accompanying him were also stunned when they heard the price. They smiled and followed him out. Miss Mia, I'd like a helping of Buddha jumps over the wall, and a helping of Yangzhou fried rice, as well as a la Reggiamo. Harrison ordered with a smile as soon as he sat down. He sighed in his heart. There were indeed benefits to being single. Hubby, what do you want to eat tonight? Do you want a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall? Then, 3 Reggiamos will do. You must eat until you are full. Just then, a soft and sweet voice sounded from the side. A beautiful young woman helped a man who was walking unsteadily to sit opposite Harrison. They were very affectionate. Can't a single dog like me eat properly? Harrison thought sourly in his heart. Chapter 1144. The Gould Manor was brightly lit, and a banquet was going on. The nobles in glamorous gowns were chatting and laughing with crystal glasses. The head of the Gould family, Mr. Charney, had invited everyone to attend the 3-year promise between him and his son. Of course, everyone close to Charney knew that he was planning to use this opportunity to formally introduce his successor to everyone. Everyone knew that the young master of the Gould family didn't like to do business, but liked to be a knight. Charney had been very anxious all these years. However, the 3-year promise was up tonight, and that young master who was once praised for his extraordinary talent didn't manage to become a mid-tier knight. According to the promise, he had to give up his dream of being a knight and become the successor of the Gould family. As one of the 4 biggest families in Chaos City, the Gould family had quite a bit of influence in Chaos City. The treatment of being the only son made the other nobles who were fighting for the right of inheritance very envious. However, this young Master Adams was stubborn and only wanted to be a knight. He had already become a joke among the second-generation nobles. That young Master Adams must be feeling terrible today, right? He's going to be forced to inherit billions of assets. Ha! Although he says he doesn't want it, he's probably overjoyed in his heart. How can there be a fool who doesn't like money in this world? Isn't that so? I heard many families want to send their young mistresses to the Gould Manor. He should be very happy too. A few young nobles gathered together and chatted merrily. Their tone was full of disdain and mockery, but their expressions were filled with envy and jealousy. Charney was very happy today. He welcomed the guests with a smile, and even his bald head seemed to be much brighter. His wife stood beside him and welcomed the guests with a smile too. When there was no one around, she tugged at Charney's sleeve and softly said, "Master, will Adams be unhappy? You've created such a big scene. Will he feel embarrassed and not want to come? Don't worry. Honesty is part of the chivalry that he loves the most. He will definitely come. This is a promise between men." Charney shook his head without worry. After that, he took 2 steps forward with a smile, and shook hands with Hill, who had just arrived. He smiled and said, "Miss Hill, thank you for coming." "You're welcome. This interesting duel is really worth witnessing," Hill said with a smile as she retracted her hand. "The city lord has arrived." A voice was heard. Everyone quietened down instantly. They all looked towards the door in shock that Charney had invited the city lord. "City lord, thank you for taking the time to come despite your busy schedule." Charney and his wife hurriedly went forward, and spoke respectfully with smiles on their faces. Today, he had put in a lot of effort to help Adams. However, as the successor of the Gould family, he deserved such a scene. "Charney, I'm not here for you today. I'm here for that young knight who is vexed about inheriting his family fortune or becoming an outstanding knight. Personally, I'm very supportive of him becoming an outstanding knight and protecting Chaos City," Michael said with a forthright smile. Charney was slightly taken aback, but he quickly smiled and said, "You are his idol. If he heard you say that, he would probably be overjoyed." The guests arrived one after another. A man who was closer to Charney smiled and said, "Charney, where is our knight Adams? He's the main character today. Don't worry. He will come." "He should be on his way now," Charney replied with a smile. Charney replied with a smile as he shot a look at the old butler who was standing at the side. The butler understood what he meant and turned to leave quickly. Everyone toasted and chatted with one another. There weren't many banquets like this where half of Chaos City's nobles were gathered. Many people were here to make more friends and establish deeper relationships with the nobles. That was the objective of many of them. As for witnessing the young master of the Gould family become the heir, it was just a formality. The news about him was not a secret. He had not made any progress in the past 3 years, so it was basically determined that he would never be able to become a mid-tier knight. Of course, as the heir of a family, he did not need to be very powerful. Hence, he would still become one of the nobles in Chaos City after he took control of the Gould family completely. His efforts to become a knight were nothing but a joke in the eyes of most people. "Charney, you can retire with peace of mind now," a middle-aged man said with a smile as he clinked glasses with Charney. "I still have a long way to go before I can let him familiarize himself with the business and know how to manage a family business." Charney shook his head. The smile on his face betrayed his feelings. The entire banquet was joyous and harmonious. Everyone was waiting for the arrival of Adams. The joke of the 3-year agreement could finally come to an end. Young, the old butler was just about to knock on the door when it opened from the inside. Adams, who was wearing gold and silver armor, walked out with a huge sword hanging on his waist. He was not wearing any armor, and his hair was very short. He looked almost bald. However, if one looked closely, they could see that his short hair was like the grass that had just sprouted in spring, trying to grow. "Let's go," Adams said calmly as he glanced at the old butler. Young master, it's not very appropriate for you to dress like this. I have already prepared a suit for you. Why don't you go back and change into it?" the butler said hesitantly. He felt that the young master looked a little different today, but he couldn't tell what was different. "It's okay. I'm not going to attend the banquet today. I'm just fulfilling the 3-year promise." Adams took the lead and walked forward. "Young master, it's not very appropriate." The old butler hurriedly followed behind. He finally understood why Adams looked a little different. He wasn't wearing a wig today. Moreover, young master's hair actually grew out again. The old butler followed behind Adams, and his heart trembled as he looked at the short hair on his shiny head. As an old man who had stayed in the Gould Manor for his entire life, he had witnessed old Master Gould's bald life. He had also witnessed Patriarch Charney's journey from a bald youth to a bald middle-aged man. He had also witnessed young Master Adams going bald at an early age. Being bald was like a curse that was tightly attached to the Gould family. But now, Adam's hair actually grew out again. Wasn't this too unbelievable? "Father, I'm here." Adams stepped into the banquet hall and shouted loudly. Chapter 11:45. The armor that shone brightly under the light and the bald head attracted everyone's attention immediately. Everyone looked at Adams, who was standing at the entrance of the banquet hall, in astonishment. Their gazes could not help but linger on his head for a while before their expressions became strange. It was said that the Gould family had hereditary baldness. Be it the previous patriarch or Charney, they had all gone bald at a young age. However, Adams had always displayed a hairy appearance, which made people suspicious. From the looks of it now, he should have been hiding his symptoms of premature baldness. In fact, he had already followed in his father's and grandfather's footsteps and become a member of the baldness army. What a pity. Many young mistresses felt as if their hearts were about to shatter. Adams was the perfect spokesperson for a rich, handsome, and muscular family. He was almost the best choice for a marriage alliance. However, he had gone bald at such a young age. This was really unacceptable. Pfft, ha ha ha. The few youngsters who had previously surrounded Adams and mocked him stared blankly at him for a moment before bursting into mocking laughter. The atmosphere in the banquet hall became awkward because of Adams' appearance. The Hill looked at Adams with a hint of surprise in his eyes. His gaze moved from the top of his head to the shiny armor on his body, and a smile of interest appeared at the corner of his mouth. Michael looked at Adams, then at Charney, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Now that I look at it, they do look like father and son. Adams. Charney was also slightly taken aback when he saw Adams. He did not expect Adams to make an appearance in such a manner. One had to know that he had been refusing to meet people ever since his hair became sparse. After he got the wig, he would always wear it at home. Other than a few old servants, no one knew that he had lost all his hair. However, he had removed his wig now. As for the armor on his body, even a 10th-tier knight like the Castellan would remove his armor and put on a proper ceremonial robe when he attended a banquet. He had obviously dressed like this on purpose. Charney's expression quickly returned to indifference, as if he had expected this. He smiled at Adams and said, "Adams, you're here. 3 years ago, you said that this was a promise between men. 3 years have passed, and as a man, of course I have to fulfill this promise." Adams walked into the banquet hall with his sword in hand. He had a straight figure and a handsome face. Although there was almost no hair on his head, people still couldn't help but want to take a few more glances at him. So handsome. Even if he doesn't have hair, he can still kill those guys who can't even stand straight. A young lady held her chest and revealed a fangirl-like smile. Ha, you're already bald, and you're still trying to act cool. What a big braised egg. A skinny young man with sunken eyes sneered. A few young men dressed in luxurious clothes beside him also chuckled, and their faces were filled with mockery and pride. Charney was originally worried that Adams would be completely dejected because of this matter. Seeing how composed he looked, he couldn't help but feel emotional. It seemed like Adams had finally thought it through. He nodded with a smile and said, "Seems like my child has indeed grown up and become a real man who can take responsibility and fulfill his promise. In this case, I can also entrust the Gould family to you without worry. Chief Charney, congratulations on getting an outstanding successor. Young Master Adams will definitely become an outstanding businessman like you." The people around them had already started to congratulate and flatter him in advance. Some even raised their wine glasses and prepared to toast. Charney's face was glowing. He had waited for this day for so many years, and it had finally come. It was his biggest wish to let the Gould family inherit its huge business and nurture Adams to become an outstanding businessman and a qualified chief. Everyone felt that the result of this 3-year promise was already set in stone. This was just a grand entrance ceremony that Charney had prepared for Adams. It meant that he had officially entered the circle of nobles and would eventually become one of the best among them. It was just a formality without any suspense. Charney placed his hand on Adams' shoulder and announced loudly, "I, Charney, the chief of the Gould family, officially announce here today that my son, Adams, will become the only father." Adams interrupted Charney's words. He looked into his eyes with a serious expression and said, 3 years ago, we agreed that if I couldn't become a mid-level knight in 3 years, I would obey all of your arrangements unconditionally, be it marriage or inheriting the family assets. However, if I became a mid-level knight, I would be in charge of my own life from now on, and you wouldn't interfere in any way, right?" The banquet hall was silent. Everyone looked at Adams in confusion. They didn't understand why he had to repeat this meaningless agreement. Charney looked at Adams and nodded with a smile. "Yes, we agreed on this 3 years ago. So, it's time for you to fulfill your promise now." Clang! Adams drew the long sword from his waist and raised it high above his head. A golden glow lit up from the sword hilt and climbed up along the patterns on the sword. It turned into a golden glow that enveloped the long sword and covered the extravagant chandelier above his head. This is sword aura light. It's the most obvious sign of a mid-level knight. Someone in the crowd exclaimed softly. The quiet banquet hall gradually became noisy. Everyone looked at the shining long sword with astonishment on their faces. Adams actually became a 4th-level knight. How is this possible? Didn't they say that his abilities had regressed over the past 3 years? How did he suddenly break through? The skinny young man who had mocked Adams earlier was in disbelief. He felt as though he had swallowed a fly. However, if this is the case, Adams should have won this 3-year agreement, right? More and more gazes were directed at Charney. He had painstakingly created such a scene just to pave the way for Adams to enter the circle of nobles in Chaos City. He didn't expect the tables to turn at the last moment. This was really too unexpected. This chap is quite interesting. Michael looked at Adams with a hint of admiration. So many rich and powerful people were racking their brains to fight for power and wealth, but this kid didn't want anything, and only wanted to become a real knight. Such a young man was really rare. Charney looked at the glowing long sword in Adams' hand. He opened his mouth, but didn't know what to say. Chapter 1146. Charney, who had been in the business world for a long time, still couldn't control the shock on his face when he saw the glowing longsword in Adam's hand. Just 3 days ago, he even specially looked for the master who taught Adam's swordsmanship to confirm it. Adams didn't succeed in breaking through, and it seemed like he might stay at the level of a third-level knight for the rest of his life. That was why there was this grand banquet. But why did Adams become a mid-level knight today? This was really too puzzling. Mrs. Charney stood at the side, and looked at the father and son with a conflicted expression. She was happy for Adams, but she was also worried for Charney. She didn't know what to say. Adams, when did you break through? Have you really become a mid-level knight? Charney asked Adams as he quickly calmed himself down. He had a doubtful look in his eyes. I just broke through last night, Adams said calmly. He then looked at Michael at the side, and respectfully said, I would like to invite the Castellan to be the witness as to whether I have become a mid-level knight. Turning the sword into light. This is indeed something that can only be achieved after breaking through to 4th tier. I have observed the blood in Adam's body, and he has indeed reached 4th tier. He has officially become a mid-level knight. Michael nodded before extending his right hand to Adams. He smiled and said, Congratulations, young knight. Thank you. Adams quickly put away his long sword and shook Michael's hand. He couldn't hide the excitement on his face. With the Castellan as a witness, it seems like this 3-year promise is going to end with Adam's victory. Charney is probably going to have insomnia again. I really don't know what to say about this son of his. So impressive, a young 4th tier knight. Everyone looked at Adams and his son with different expressions. Some were surprised, some were gloating, and there were also some fangirls who revealed admiring smiles. Father, you will keep your promise, right? Adams looked at Charney as he tried his best to control his emotions. Charney's hands were trembling slightly. He had waited for this day for 3 whole years. He thought that victory was in his hands, and he was about to start his plan to groom his successor. He didn't expect Adams to give him such a huge blow. However, the stage had already been set up, and most of the nobles in Chaos City had gathered here. City Lord Michael had made the decision himself, and if he were to go back on his word, then he would be a complete liar, and the Gould family would be completely disgraced. Adams, I admire your character and talent as a knight, and you have once again proven this in front of everyone by becoming an honorable 4th tier knight. Your mother and I are proud of you. Charney reached out and patted Adams' shoulder gently as he said with an amiable smile, Don't worry, Adams, I'm not a knight. I promise you that I will not interfere with your progress towards becoming a great knight in the future. However, I hope that you can consider becoming a great knight while also becoming an outstanding successor of the Gould family. You will shoulder the responsibility of continuing the glory of the Gould family. Charney looked at Adams with a burning gaze. There was hope and anticipation in his eyes. Adams, you are your father's only child. Adam's mother also took 2 steps forward and held Charney's hand gently as she looked at Adams affectionately. Everyone was looking at Adams. No one should be able to reject such an offer, right? In the eyes of most people, Adams only wanted to become a knight because he wanted to have fun. When he had enough fun, he would return to his original position. I'm sorry, father. I reject. Adams looked at Charney and lifted his chin slightly as he revealed a confident smile. My hair has already grown back. I believe that I can become an outstanding knight. My goal is to become a great knight like Alex. What I need is focus, so I cannot be distracted by money and women. Hair. Charney's gaze shifted upwards, and landed on Adam's head. His head was shining under the bright candlelight, and there was indeed a layer of new hair that was as fine as hair. It was like the grass that was moistened by the spring rain as it stuck out from the top of his head. Adam's hair has really grown back." Adam's mother was elated. She took a few steps forward instinctively, and her eyes turned red as she looked at the new hair that covered the top of his head. "It has really grown back," Charney murmured in surprise. Back then, when he started to lose his hair, he had also shut himself off for a period of time. He had thought of countless ways to regrow his hair, but neither the doctors nor the mages could do anything about it. It took him many years to slowly accept his bald appearance, but he still felt uncomfortable every time he heard people talking about it behind his back. "Wow, baldness can be cured now." Everyone expressed their surprise. Many people who were suffering from hair loss had their eyes lit up. They looked at Adams and thought about how they could get close to him and ask for the method to cure their hair loss. Charney looked at Adams, and it was as though he was covered in a layer of light. His gaze was still as clean and pure as a youth's. He recalled the youth who wanted to become an outstanding musician but chose to compromise in the end. Now, he had already forgotten how to hold a musical instrument. "Have I still become the person I hated back then?" Charney thought self-deprecatingly. He looked at Adams with a smile, and said, "Since you want to become a knight like Alex, who was invincible when he was 30 years old, I will wait for you for another 10 years. If you are still a nobody by then, I will already be old. You can come back and inherit the family business." Adams looked at Charney in surprise. He thought that his father would try all ways to stop him. He did not expect him to propose a 10-year agreement again. Looking at the loneliness in his eyes, Adams felt guilty for the first time. After a moment of silence, he nodded solemnly and said, "All right, a 10-year agreement. If I am still a nobody after 10 years, I will definitely come back and inherit the family business and continue the glory of the Gould family." Michael took a step forward and laughed heartily. "Since this is the case, let me be the witness for this 10-year agreement." What a strange person. The Hill thought to himself as he looked at Adams. However, on second thought, he was probably also a strange person in the eyes of others. It was late at night, and Amy's had already closed for business. The pitch-black hall on the first floor was completely silent. Just then, a bat that was hanging upside down in the corner quietly landed, and turned into Camilla, who was wearing a black dress. She laughed coldly, and said, "Ah, stupid human. Wait until I get the photo stone. I will definitely teach you a lesson. No pop-up window." Chapter 1147. In the dimly lit dining room, Camilla looked around and silently walked toward the staircase. She had already secretly observed the structure of the room upstairs when she was changing in the afternoon. There shouldn't be anything hidden in the bathroom, and the room on the right was closed. She didn't know what was inside. She directly ignored the room filled with all kinds of toys. There were 2 more rooms on the left. One of them should be Gina's room, and the other should be Meg's room. This guy, he might have other plans for letting the mermaids stay with him in the shop. Luckily, I brought a photo stone. If there is something going on between the two of them, I can record it and use it as evidence. Camilla took out a white stone from her bosom as a proud smile appeared on her face. Soon, she tiptoed to the second floor. Click. Camilla opened the door to the study on the right softly. She dashed into the study. Her eyes emitted a faint light in the dark, and she could see everything clearly. The study wasn't big. There was a wall of bookshelves, and more than half of them were filled with books. There was also a brown wooden desk with 2 books and a tea set on it. There was nothing else in the room. Did this fellow really read so many books? Camilla's gaze swept across the various books on the bookshelves as she muttered doubtfully. Then, she started to search the room. However, she could see everything in the room in one glance. There were no cabinets or anything of the sort, and she didn't see any photo stone at all. Just as I expected, this fellow must have hidden the photo stone in the bedroom, and then peeked under the blankets in the middle of the night. He is indeed a perverted stinky man. Camilla clenched her teeth and muttered to herself. If it weren't for the fact that he was a good cook, she would definitely tear him into a million pieces. Camilla took a deep breath and adjusted her mood. Then, she slowly walked toward the bedroom. Although there was a wooden door between them, she could already feel the steady breathing of the 3 people in the room. They should all be sleeping. She was a 9th-grade vampire. It was too easy for her to hide from a normal person and 2 little ones. She placed her hand on the door handle, and then silently opened the door. Camilla was stunned as she looked at the wooden door that didn't move. Why didn't the door move? Could it be locked from the inside? A trace of doubt appeared in Camilla's eyes. She turned the doorknob half a circle and then pulled the doorknob outwards with more force. The door remained motionless. Camilla stared at the door handle for a while to make sure that the door was not locked from the inside. But strangely, no matter how hard she tried, the door could not be opened. Her forehead was already covered in cold sweat. What kind of broken door is this? It's so hard to open the door. If I can't pull you away today, I'm not Camilla. Camilla said to herself angrily. She stretched her arms and legs and reached for the door handle again. Crack. At this moment, the unmoving wooden door made a soft sound and then slowly opened inwards. Meg leaned against the door frame in his pajamas and yawned. He looked at Camilla helplessly and said, "The door opens inwards." Camilla's expression instantly stiffened. She looked at Meg, who was standing by the door, and then looked at the wooden door that was slowly opening. She felt that her intelligence had been insulted. Furthermore, why was Meg standing here? Shouldn't he have finished watching the image recording stone and fallen into a deep sleep on his bed? Why are you awake? Camilla subconsciously blurted out. If your doorknob was abused like this, even a pig would have woken up. Meg glanced at the doorknob. Luckily, it was not broken. Actually, when Camilla had just appeared in the dining room, Meg had already received the system's notification and the tracking video at the same time. He only left the warm bed and opened the door for her when he saw that she was so stupid that she was about to tear the door apart. Furthermore, shouldn't I be the one asking you why you are here? Meg stood up straight and said with a teasing expression. Camilla panicked. In her plan, she would quietly get the photo stone. This was a matter of course. She did not even consider that she would be caught on the spot because she could not open the door. She looked at Meg and was stunned for 3 seconds. She started to retreat as she said, "Well, I seem to have entered the wrong room. It's getting late. You should go to sleep first. Don't worry about me." As soon as she finished speaking, she disappeared down the stairs. Then, there was a commotion downstairs, and the sound completely disappeared. This woman seems to be unwilling to stay in the dining room and be a waitress. Meg wrapped his clothes tightly and went downstairs to close the kitchen window. He then locked it. He indeed only had 1 photo stone, but the system could make countless copies at any time. Therefore, he did not care whether Camilla stole the photo stone or not. However, he thought that she would be content to be a waitress for a year. Now, it seemed that she was not so content. He had to be more careful in the future. Back in the room, Meg covered the 2 little ones with the blanket that Amy had kicked away. Then, he lay back on the bed and continued to sleep. Camilla turned into a bat and flew out of the dining room. She landed in the forest outside the dining room and stood on the top of a big tree. She looked angrily in the direction of Amy's. "Madam, did you succeed?" Caesar jumped onto the big tree and looked at Camilla expectantly. Camilla's eyelids twitched. She was naturally too embarrassed to speak of such an embarrassing experience. Her expression regained its calmness as she took out an image recording stone and said, "This kind of thing naturally can't stump me. It's just a stupid human. Madam is wise." Caesar's eyes lit up. He immediately said happily, "In this case, Madam will not have to be threatened by that guy anymore. You also don't have to be a waitress in that restaurant anymore." Ahem. Camilla put away the photo stone and said with an uneasy expression, "Of course, I will not be threatened by a human. However, I will not let him off so easily. Therefore, I will continue to lurk in his restaurant and find evidence of his wrongdoings. I will give it to Miss Gloria so that she will completely give up on him. When that time comes, I will take advantage of the situation and succeed." "Madam is wise," Caesar said with a face full of admiration. Camilla smiled proudly, but the corners of her mouth were a little stiff. "I have to start serving breakfast for the cleaners tomorrow. I have to learn how to make the congee with pork and century egg first." Lying on the bed, Meg pushed open the door to the test field for the god of cookery and stepped in. How did an ordinary duck egg turn into a beautiful century egg? It was more like a chemical reaction than a cooking process. The chosen egg was soaked in a mixture of alkali, salt, tea leaves, mulberry wood ash, and so on for a few days. After it was taken out, it was rolled in dry mud and then wrapped in rice chaff. Only then would the century egg be considered a success. Chapter 1148. A failed century egg. A mediocre century egg. A century egg that doesn't have enough skin. Meg looked at the delicately patterned century egg on the plate and raised his eyebrows. "System, what the hell do you mean by not having enough skin?" Profile picture, Meg Shun 3 years ago, from the Porsche client of HUAWE Mate 10-inch What Authentic Lake Weishan century egg. It doesn't have any skin at all. You'd better go home and look at Pikachu before cooking. Meg, what the fuck? Meg threw the century egg into the waste bin at the side and continued cooking. Life, if he could start over, he would definitely be a kind and loving rich second-generation heir who loved life and would never go online blindly. Failure. Failure. Failure, congratulations. You've successfully made a very chewy century egg. A successful century egg was indeed very chewy. Meg poked it with his finger. The chewiness was very obvious, and it sank slightly. After he removed his finger, it returned to its original state very quickly. The tea-brown century egg was translucent, and there were pine branch patterns on the surface. It was naturally formed, but it didn't lose its exquisiteness. It was like the work of a Chinese painting master, and it was amazing. After he cut it open, the 3 different colors were very distinct. The outer circle was very elastic and was a translucent tea-brown color. The middle circle was slightly yellow and had a soft texture. The middle circle was golden yellow. It was beautiful, like an exquisite work of art. Meg nodded with satisfaction. This was a century egg that was chewy and good-looking. A faint fragrance wafted over. After the century egg was done, cooking porridge was nothing to Meg. After dozens of failures, a bowl of century egg and lean meat porridge that looked, smelled, and tasted good was successfully cooked. "I'll have this for breakfast tomorrow." A smile appeared on Meg's face as he inhaled the aroma wafting toward him. He then exited the test field for the god of cookery. The next morning, Meg opened the door and saw Camilla standing at the door. He teased, "It seems that our countess has found the right door today." A faint blush appeared on Camilla's arrogant face. She looked at Meg as if she wanted to eat him up. She snorted coldly and directly pushed Meg aside to enter the restaurant. Meg rubbed his shoulder that was a little sore from the collision. His gaze fell on Camilla, who had started cutting cucumbers the moment she'd entered the kitchen. He raised his eyebrows inwardly. This woman is not to be trifled with. Uncle Meg, is there anything I can help you with? Anna came downstairs and asked Meg. If Anna wants to help. Meg glanced at the time. It was only 6:00. The little girl really remembered her promise and got up early to help. Good morning, boss. Good morning, Anna. At this time, Yabamiya's voice came from outside. She walked in with a smile and greeted Meg and Anna. Morning, Elizabeth said flatly as she followed him into the room. It's so early. I think I should sleep a little longer. Barbara yawned as she walked in. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and still looked sleepy. Everyone is here so early. I thought I was the earliest, Gina said in surprise as she walked down the stairs and blinked her eyes. Boss, we're all here. If there's anything you need us to do, just tell us. Yabamiya looked at Mag with an energetic smile, and said energetically, we're all here, boss. Meg looked at all the people present. There was still more than an hour before work started, but they all came early in such cold weather. He was touched, and said with a smile, I'm going to make breakfast for them now. It's congee with pork and century egg. It's also a new product that we're going to launch today. Take a seat and rest. I'll need you when the congee is distributed. Also, if you want to come at 6:30 in the future. Sleep more in the morning, Meg added as he walked to the entrance of the kitchen. A pot that was big enough to wash the rice and boil it over a large fire. Then, he added the various ingredients one by one. Meg was already familiar with the steps. The congee gradually thickened in the pot. At this time, there were already cleaners outside the restaurant carrying mops. They looked into the restaurant carefully. Oh my, look at this big crystal. Such a big piece, and there are 2 of them. How much would it cost? An old man exclaimed as he looked at the floor-to-ceiling glass window of the restaurant. He reached out to touch it, but he quickly retracted his hand when he was about to touch it. He said with lingering fear, if I break it, I won't be able to pay for it even if I sell my old bones. Yes, such a beautiful restaurant. This is the only one in the Aden Square. Even Dukas restaurant pales in comparison, an old lady exclaimed. Do you think the boss will really prepare breakfast for us? I heard that the cheapest dish here costs 200 copper coins per serving. There are so many of us here. Won't we have to eat a few thousand copper coins? Or is he just going to make something for us? A skinny old man said worriedly. Elton, don't talk nonsense. Mr. Mack is a good person. If he said he would prepare breakfast for us, he will definitely prepare it for us, old Jack said with a glare. Also, Mr. Mack is providing breakfast for us for free. Don't tell me you want to eat the best. I was just saying. I didn't even bring any biscuits today. If we don't have anything to eat, we will have to go hungry, Elton said with an embarrassed smile. He didn't say anything else. The cleaners gradually gathered at the door. They had started work at 4 in the morning. After sweeping for more than 2 hours in the cold, they were cold and hungry. Many of them were already stomping their feet on the spot. Sir, what are you guys doing at the entrance of the restaurant so early in the morning? Did you guys form a group to eat? Harrison and George asked curiously when they saw the cleaners gathered at the entrance of the restaurant. They had made an appointment to exercise in the morning, but they ended up lining up at the entrance of the restaurant after running a few steps. The boss of this restaurant is a good person. He said he would provide us with breakfast for free. Isn't it almost 6:30? We are waiting for breakfast, old Jack said with a chuckle. Wow, Mr. Mack is providing you with breakfast for free. How fortunate. Harrison looked at everyone enviously. Mr. Mack is really a good person, George said with a smile. Ding! Right at this moment, the bell on the door rang, and the door of the restaurant opened. Mia walked out with a relaxed expression, carrying a large pot that was much thicker than her waist. She gently placed it on the ground by the door. Is this what Mr. Mac meant by weak women? Harrison and George swallowed their saliva at the same time. Yabamiya smiled at everyone, and then opened the lid of the big pot. A unique fragrance, accompanied by steaming hot steam, immediately surged towards the crowd. Chapter 1149. It smells so good. Everyone at the entrance of the restaurant looked at the big barrel, their eyes full of surprise. Smelling the tempting aroma and looking at the rising steam, their already hungry stomachs began to rumble. What is this? Why does it smell so good? An old man swallowed his saliva and stretched his neck to look at the big barrel. It smells so good. It smells like meat. Is he going to give us meat in the morning? Elton licked his lips and said in surprise. Meat. The moment they heard meat, the eyes of the cleaners lit up. With their salary, it was barely enough to fill their stomachs. They could only eat meat once every few months. If they could eat meat every morning, that would be too blissful. This smell is so unique. Is Mr. Mac coming out with a new product again? Harrison was also curious. He took 2 steps forward and looked into the barrel. The rising steam shrouded the big barrel, and he could not see what was inside. Just then, Meg walked out with a bulletin board and hung it on the door. Today's new product, Century Egg and Lean Meat Porridge. Special for breakfast, Harrison said softly. He clapped his hands and said, I knew it. This must be a new product. Let's eat this for breakfast. Okay. George nodded. Mr. Mac's new products will never disappoint. Meg nodded at Harrison and George in greeting. Then, he smiled at the cleaners and said, everyone is here. Please wait a moment. We will serve you a bowl of piping hot century egg and lean meat porridge. Century egg and lean meat porridge. That means there really is meat. Elton looked at the big barrel with sparkling eyes. His salary was not even enough for him to gamble, and he was in debt everywhere. He had not eaten a full meal for a long time, let alone meat. Mr. Mac, it's okay. We're not hungry, old Jack said with a chuckle. Nonsense. Your stomach has been rumbling for a long time, the old lady beside him said with a smile. As soon as the old lady's voice fell, a gurgling sound came from the surroundings, causing everyone to roar with laughter. Looks like they're all hungry. Meg smiled and took a large bowl from Yabamiya. He scooped up a bowl full of congee with pork and century egg and passed it to the cleaner standing in front of him. It was a bowl of thick porridge, with maroon shredded meat and translucent century eggs as decorations, and a pinch of tender green onion sprinkled on top. It looked, smelled, and tasted good, making people salivate just by looking at it. Yabamiya looked at the crowd and smiled. Everyone, line up and come forward to get your porridge. After a short period of chaos, the cleaners quickly lined up in 2 rows according to the usual lines for meetings and came forward to get the porridge one by one. It's a little hot. Be careful, Meg cautioned. Thank you. You're such a nice person. The cleaner took the bowl of porridge and said gratefully. He carried the big bowl and walked to the side of the stairs in the square. He placed his sack on the stairs and sat on the ground. He held the bowl and carefully blew on it. Meat, it's really meat. Elton took the congee with pork and century egg, and his eyes lit up when he saw the shredded meat in the porridge. It was as if he had seen a precious gem. He turned around, and directly reached out to grab a piece of shredded meat and stuffed it into his mouth without caring about how hot the porridge was. He chewed, and 2 streams of hot tears rolled down from the corners of his eyes. Meat. It's really the taste of meat. More and more cleaners received their congee with pork and century egg. Most of them carefully held their bowls and sat on the stairs at the side, using the bowl to warm their cold and stiff hands. The heat and aroma wafted into their faces, and added a hint of smile and anticipation to their wrinkled and dark faces. Mr. Mac is such a nice person. Providing breakfast for these old people is more practical than anything else, Harrison said. However, his gaze was fixed on the congee with pork and century egg in the bowl, and he swallowed his saliva. These old people are so pitiful. Yabamiya looked at those old people with pity. They were already so old, yet they still had to come early in the morning to do cleaning work. So the job of a cleaner is so tough and difficult? I thought they only needed to use magic to do it casually. Barbara held her chin with a curious expression. This was too different from what she had imagined. She had always thought that these old people with big brooms were actually wizards. Elton wiped his tears, and looked at those cleaners sitting on the stairs. His gaze landed on the empty seats at the side. There were beautiful wooden tables and chairs with exquisite carvings. Usually, only the rich and powerful could sit there and enjoy expensive food. However, they could only sit on those cold stairs. Why can they sit there, but we can't? Since he wants to be a good person, why can't he do it to the end? Elton suddenly felt jealous. He turned to look at Meg and chuckled. Mr. Mac, since you're a good person, let me sit there and eat. It's not convenient to eat sitting on the stairs. Sit. The cleaner's gazes also landed on the few tables and chairs placed at the entrance. If they could sit comfortably in front of a table like the rich and eat hot porridge, it would indeed be a very good thing. Meg passed the porridge in his hand to old Jack, who was at the back of the line, and reminded him to be careful not to burn himself. Only then did he look at Elton. His few white hairs were flying messily, and his tattered cotton-padded jacket had not been washed for a long time. There were layers of grease and dirt, and even his face looked like it could be scraped off half a kilogram of dirt. He was no different from a homeless person. However, he was a paid cleaner. Although his salary was not high, it was enough to ensure a normal person's food and clothing. Even if he could not live a decent life, at least he could live a cleaner life. Meg looked at Elton and said calmly, "I'm sorry, sir. I can provide breakfast for you, but I can't provide a place to eat because the restaurant will be open for business soon. As you know, cleaning is not an easy task. I need to ensure that my restaurant can operate normally." "What does that have to do with anything? Can't we just wipe you clean after we're done? Do you think we're dirty?" Elton said innocently. The cleaner's gazes landed on Meg with an indescribable emotion. Meg looked at Elton with a slight frown. Did the thing he was most worried about still happen? "Dirty Grandpa, don't you know that you're really dirty?" Just then, a soft and cute voice sounded from the restaurant. Amy walked out with Ugly Duckling in her arms and looked at Elton with disdain. Chapter 1150. Elton looked at Amy and opened his mouth to argue. However, Amy did not give him a chance to speak. She looked at him and continued, "Look at your dirty hands. I'm afraid you haven't washed them for years, right? Even Ugly Duckling's little paws are cleaner than yours. And those dirty clothes, don't tell me you haven't changed your clothes since the winter of the year before last. But there was a warm summer in between. That must be because you were too lazy. Also, is it so difficult to wash your face every day? Look at how clean that Grandpa's face is. That's why he has a wife." Elton took 3 steps back and clutched his chest. He felt as if he had been dealt a heavy blow. "Father said that the cleaners brought us clean Aden Square every day. It was very tiring and cold, so he and my sisters woke up early to prepare a delicious breakfast for everyone. Why would he think that you were dirty?" Amy said to the crowd with a smile. Then, her gaze fixed on Elton, and she said with disdain, "But you are really dirty." Elton took 3 more steps back. He felt as if he could not breathe properly. Many of the cleaners had ashamed expressions on their faces. Indeed, Mr. Mag and these beautiful ladies had no responsibility to do these things. They woke up early for the cleaners and cooked breakfast for the cleaners as well as the customers in the restaurant, but they still weren't satisfied. And when these words came from the mouth of a little girl, it made everyone feel even more ashamed. They all looked at Meg gratefully. Old Jack looked at Elton and said seriously, "Elton, Mr. Meg has already done so much for us. How can you trouble him to add more work for you? Mr. Meg may not mind, but what about the people who come to this beautiful restaurant to eat? Are they willing to spend so much money to sit at the seats we just sat at? I don't want to be associated with your behavior." Old Jack turned to look at Meg and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Mr. Meg. If we have caused you trouble, you don't have to prepare breakfast for us in the future. This is not something you need to do in the first place." The other cleaners also stood up. Although they didn't say anything, they looked at Elton with disdain and a little apologetic. Realizing that he seemed to have angered the crowd, Elton looked away and coughed dryly. He squeezed out a smile and said, "I was just joking. You don't have to take it to heart. I'll just sit on the stairs and eat." After saying that, he immediately turned around and sat at the corner of the stairs. He held the bowl and picked up the spoon to eat the porridge. That tiny piece of meat had allowed him to taste the most delicious food in the world. How could he let it go? Meg glanced at Elton, then smiled at the cleaners and said, "Everyone, continue eating. If it's not enough, there's more in the pot." Hearing this, the cleaners sat back down. "Grandpa Jack, you and your wife should hurry up and eat your breakfast. It won't taste good when it gets cold," Meg said to old Jack with a smile. "You're such a good person," old Jack said with a complicated expression. He brought the old lady to sit on the stairs at the side and began to eat the porridge. Restrained kindness. Mr. Mack is indeed a good person with a clear mind. Harrison glanced at the cleaners sitting on the stairs and looked at Meg with admiration. George nodded and sighed, and said, "Yeah." Kraut's bakery back then had to close down in less than half a month because it provided unlimited food for the homeless. Furthermore, the boss was beaten into a cripple by the homeless. He's also wandering the streets now. Wow! This porridge is too delicious. A cleaner picked up a spoon and scooped a spoonful of porridge into his mouth. The lean meat that melted in his mouth along with the porridge, as well as the unique texture of the century egg, brought about an incomparable delicious experience. For a person who could only eat plain porridge or pancakes without fillings on a daily basis, a bowl of porridge with a meaty aroma was simply the best delicacy. After swallowing a mouthful of hot porridge, the warmth slid down his throat to his stomach before spreading outwards. His cold body quickly warmed up from the inside out. "It's so delicious. I've never eaten such delicious porridge before." Simple praises could be heard as the cleaners sat on the stairs and ate the porridge with lean meat and century egg. Their faces were filled with blissful smiles as they immersed themselves in the delicious food. The cold was dispelled by the hot porridge, and the tiredness disappeared as well. The delicious porridge filled their empty stomachs and turned into heat and energy that gradually filled their bodies. Looking at this scene, Meg smiled. Although he had never flaunted himself as a good person, it was undeniable that doing good deeds would indeed make one feel better. Yabamiya and the rest also had happy smiles on their faces. Although they woke up much earlier than usual, this feeling was still very good. Gulp. Harrison and George touched their stomachs at the same time, and their eyes landed on the big pot at the side. "Father, I want to eat that porridge too." Amy raised her little hand and pointed at the big pot with a firm expression. "A big bowl. All right, I'll get it for you. Meg nodded with a smile. He picked up a big bowl, scooped a bowl of porridge with lean meat and century egg for Amy, and placed it on the table at the side. Amy climbed onto the chair happily, and began to eat the porridge with a spoon. Meow, Ugly Duckling ran over with the bowl in its mouth. It circled around under the chair, and called out to Amy anxiously. You don't have to call me, Ugly Duckling. It's not time for breakfast yet. Amy looked down at Ugly Duckling, and shook her head. Mr. Mac, we came especially early today. Can you let us try the new dish first? Harrison said to Meg with a smile. George was also looking at Meg with an expectant expression. At this time, a few more customers came one after another. When they saw the cleaners sitting in a row and smelt the tempting aroma, they all looked at Meg. It was simply too blissful to have a bowl of delicious porridge on such a cold day. I'm sorry, but business hours have not started yet. Please wait for a moment. This is the new dish launched today. You can order it when it's officially open later. Meg shook his head with a smile. There was no room for discussion at all. Harrison also knew Meg's temper and the restaurant's rules. When he saw Meg shake his head, he didn't insist anymore. He forcibly retracted his gaze from the cleaners, and couldn't help but look at Amy, who was eating happily with a spoon. Little boss, is this porridge with lean meat and century egg not skinny? Harrison asked with a smile. I'll eat it for you to see. Amy scooped up a century egg, and then bit it gently with her teeth. The century egg sunk in, and then her teeth loosened, and it returned to its original state. She bit down, loosened, bit down, loosened, and then chewed and swallowed it. She revealed a bright smile. Little boss, you're really skinny. Harrison murmured with a hint of resentment. Chapter 1151. The customers arrived one after another and formed a long line at the entrance of the restaurant. Why do I have to go through this pain so early in the morning? I suddenly want to be a cleaner. Is this congee with pork and century egg really that delicious? Looks like I have to change my breakfast today. Looking at the cleaners eating the delicious hot congee on the stairs, the customers in the line felt a strong sense of discomfort and envy. A slightly plump cleaner finished the congee in his bowl and walked to the bucket with the bowl. He said hesitantly, Can I have another mouthful of congee? Of course, I've prepared enough congee for everyone. It's enough even if everyone has another bowl. Meg smiled and nodded. He took the bowl and scooped another bowl for him. Congee was not very filling, not to mention people like them who were hungry. Thank you, the cleaner said gratefully. He carefully returned to the stairs with the bowl in his hands. Hearing Meg's words, many cleaners brought their bowls over and scooped another bowl of congee. It was their first time eating such delicious congee. If they could eat another bowl, it would be too blissful. Although the congee was delicious, the cleaners ate quickly. Not long after, they finished 2 bowls of congee. Old Jack and his wife helped to clean up the bowls and chopsticks and placed them neatly on the table at the side. The cleaners expressed their gratitude to Meg and the rest. Their old faces were flushed with smiles. Burp. Elton burped. He had already eaten 3 bowls of congee. If it wasn't for the fact that he really couldn't eat anymore, he would have eaten another bowl. He casually placed the bowl on the table and looked at the congee with pork and century egg left in the big pot. His eyes lit up and he looked at Meg with a smile. Mr. Mac, we've already eaten this congee. You don't want it anymore, right? Why don't you give it all to me? I'll take it back for lunch. It'll be a pity if you throw it away. The rest of the congee is our breakfast. It won't be thrown away. Meg took the lid and put it on the big pot. He looked at Elton and said calmly, I'm not as noble as you think. You don't have to degrade yourself so lowly. We're just ordinary people. My daughter uses the same bowl and eats from the same pot as you. So do we. The cleaners who were about to leave looked at Meg and the cute little girl who was licking the bottom of the big bowl. Their eyes suddenly became a little wet. The customer standing at the side thought. They originally minded the cleaners had used the bowls and chopsticks, but now they felt a little ashamed and looked to Meg. Elton was stunned for a moment. He felt that the atmosphere was not quite right. He did not expect that a rich restaurant owner like Meg would eat from the same pot as them. His little plan failed. He awkwardly retracted his hand and smiled. If that's the case, then I won't think about it. You guys eat, you guys eat. After saying that, he took 2 quick steps, picked up his things and left quickly. Mr. Meg, Elton is just like that. He likes to take advantage of small things, but he's not too bad. I hope you don't take it to heart. I'll talk to him later. Old Jack looked at Meg apologetically. He was the first person to get to know Meg. He felt a little apologetic that something like this had happened. It's okay. Meg smiled and shook his head. Then he looked at the crowd and said, It's still 6:30 tomorrow morning. Remember to come on time. After the cleaners expressed their gratitude, they picked up their tools and left. There was still cleaning work waiting for them. However, after eating this piping hot congee with pork and century egg, they felt warm all over. They also felt more energetic all of a sudden. They even had more energy to sweep the floor. Yabamiya carried the remaining half pot of congee with pork and century egg into the restaurant. Everyone cleared the bowls and chopsticks and entered the restaurant as well. I heard that Mr. Mack provided breakfast for the cleaners in Aiden Square. Is it a new product? Yeah, I came early and happened to see it. Those cleaners were eating happily. One look and I can tell that it's delicious. Mr. Mack is really a good person. I have to try this congee with pork and century egg this morning. I want to see what kind of skin it is. The customers arrived one after another. The news of the new product and Meg providing breakfast for the cleaners spread quickly and caused a lot of discussion. Meanwhile, in the restaurant, Meg and the rest's breakfast was indeed the congee with pork and century egg that was left in the bucket. Yabamiya's mouth moved as she swallowed a mouthful of congee. She said in surprise, this congee is really delicious. It melts in the mouth, and the texture is sticky. The fragrance of the meat has completely blended into the congee. And the century egg doesn't taste like duck eggs at all. It's so bouncy. It's so delicious. The others were also pleasantly surprised as they ate the congee with pork and century egg. It was even more delicious than they had imagined. The bouncy and beautiful century egg brought about a very wonderful experience. Father, can I have a youtiao? I think it should taste very good with this congee. Amy scooped another bowl of congee, and raised her little hand. Who else wants youtiao? Tell me your name, Meg said as he stood up and walked towards the kitchen. Then I want one too. Mia raised her hand. I want to eat too. Anna raised her little hand. Meow. Ugly Duckling tried its best to raise one of its little paws. No, you don't want to. Amy pressed its paw back down. Meow. Ugly Duckling looked at Amy aggrievedly. Its aggrieved look made one's heart ache a little. Can't you wait to grow up already? I heard from father that the most suitable weight for roast duck is 5 kilograms. Amy lowered her head and looked at it seriously. Ugly Duckling's eyes widened, and it immediately shook its head like a rattledrum. It retreated to Anna's side and hid behind her with a whoosh. Outside the restaurant, there was a long line of customers again. This corner of the deserted square seemed very lively. Please make way. Right at this moment, a black horse-drawn carriage drove over and stopped in front of the restaurant. Adams walked out of the carriage and jumped down. He said to the coachman, "Take the thing out." "Yes." The coachman answered, and went into the carriage. Soon, he carried out a long plaque covered by a red cloth carefully. "What's this?" The customers in the line looked curiously at the long plaque that the coachman was carrying. What was this knight going to do? Adams tidied up his light armor, and then walked to the restaurant's door. He knocked on the door, and loudly said, "Mr. Mac, please open the door. I have something to pass to you." Meg, who was coming out of the kitchen with a plate of fried youtiao, heard that. He placed the youtiao on the table, and gestured for the ladies to eat first. He walked to the door and opened it. He looked a little puzzled when he saw Adams standing in front of the door and the coachman carrying a long plaque behind him. Chapter 1152. Adams was wearing a set of bright gold and silver armor. This get-up reminded Mag very quickly that he was the first customer to order Buddha jumps over the wall the day before yesterday. He even appeared very excited after he finished eating. Thinker, handwritten text version. Net, however, the day before yesterday, he still had a head of thick hair. Today, his hair was so short that he almost looked bald. Only a little bit of short hair could be seen. Indeed, some people look bright and beautiful on the surface, but in reality, they are already bald inside their wigs. Meg was deep in thought. However, why was he bringing people and carrying an unknown object so early in the morning? What was he planning to do? "Mr. Mac, I am here to give you a memorial tablet," Adams said a little agitatedly. Memorial tablet. Meg raised his eyebrows. Was he here to cause trouble early in the morning? Wasn't it too much to give him a memorial tablet? When the customers heard that, they all looked sideways. This young man looked quite handsome, but from what he said, could it be that he was here to cause trouble? No, I was wrong. It's a plaque. It's a plaque of gratitude. Adams quickly realized his slip of the tongue and quickly shook his head. He turned around and tore off the red cloth on the plaque. A shiny golden plaque appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The shiny pure gold was very dazzling. Master of Hair Growth. Harrison, who was at the front of the line, blurted out. Meg looked at the shiny golden plaque and the 4 big words made of pure gold. His mouth was wide open, and he didn't know what to say for a moment. The regulars in the line looked at the short hair that had just appeared on Adam's head and then looked at the shiny golden plaque. They suddenly understood something. This. I really can't accept it. I really can't accept it. Meg shook his head and said. He was running a restaurant. What master of hair growth? Where was he supposed to hang this kind of plaque? What if people went astray in the future and gave him silk banners that said, "Medicine helps the world, unparalleled miracle doctor," or "Gynecology sage. Your extraordinary creation and invention changed my life. This plaque is just a small token of my appreciation. If you can't accept it, then no one else in this world can. Please accept it," Adams said with a sincere expression. He had commissioned someone to make it yesterday and delivered it personally this morning to express his gratitude. "Mr. Mac, just accept it. Look at this plaque. It's shiny and bright. It'll be very eye-catching if you hang it on the door. It'll help increase the restaurant's popularity," Harrison said with a chuckle. "That's right, Mr. Mac. He's also doing this to thank you. You've done a good deed, so just accept it." Soon, other customers also tried to persuade him. "Speaking of which, should I make a plaque for Mr. Mac that reads Master of Midwifery, to express my gratitude?" George looked at the plaque thoughtfully. "Please accept it, Mr. Mac," Adams said sincerely. Seeing Adam's sincere expression and listening to the other customers' persuasion, Meg pondered for a while. It wasn't appropriate for him to be in a stalemate here, so he nodded reluctantly. He looked at Adams and said, "Since you're so sincere, I can't reject it. However, although I'll accept this plaque, I won't hang it up. I'll keep it well." Adams was slightly disappointed when he heard that Meg wasn't going to hang it up. However, he quickly smiled and nodded. "All right, I'll let Mr. Mack make the decision. It's fine as long as you can accept my sincerity." "You're welcome." Meg nodded slightly and heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. If Adams insisted that he hang the plaque on the spot, Mamie's would have to change its name to Mamie Hair Growth Hall in the future. "I'll get him to bring the plaque in for you. It's a little heavy." Adams stepped aside to let the coachman pass. "It's all right. I'll bring it in myself." Meg reached out to take the plaque from the coachman. This plaque seemed to be made of gold, and it was indeed quite heavy. If it was hung outside, it would probably be stolen the next day. "Then, I'll go and eat first. I still have to send Amy to school later." With that, he turned and entered the restaurant with the plaque. "You can go back first," Adams said to the coachman, while he went straight to the back of the line and lined up. So young Master Adams' hair grew because he ate Mr. Mack's butted jumps over the wall. I wonder if his sudden breakthrough has anything to do with Mr. Mack. In the line, a middle-aged man's gaze followed Adams all the way to the back of the line. He seemed to be deep in thought. "If I tell Master Charney about this, there should be some new breakthroughs in the business that didn't go through the previous time. I heard that he was also troubled by hair loss when he was young." Meg went out, and then came in with a shiny golden plaque. He immediately attracted the attention of all the ladies who were eating at the table. "Father, what's that?" Amy asked curiously. "Hair Growth Master." "What kind of title is that?" Mia read the words on the plaque, and asked curiously. Seeing that everyone was curious, Meg explained helplessly, "A customer gave it to me. He said that I changed his life, so he specially gave me a plaque to express his gratitude." "Then, why don't you hang it outside for everyone to see?" Anna asked curiously. "Isn't it a little strange to hang the plaque of a hair growth master in a restaurant?" Barbara looked at the plaque. "Yes. We are a restaurant, after all, and it's not good to reject the customer's goodwill. However, this plaque is indeed not suitable to be hung at the door." Meg nodded in agreement. He carried the plaque and walked towards the stairs as he said, "You guys eat first. I'll bring the plaque upstairs." Ding! Congratulations, host, for obtaining the title of Hair Growth Master and triggering a hidden mission. Hair loss will cause great harm to a person's physical and mental health. As a candidate for the god of cookery, you must have the world in your heart and save those who are troubled by hair loss so that they can have beautiful hair again and welcome a new life. Please help 30 people with hair loss to get rid of their hair loss problems within 3 days. Mission success. You have received a recipe for steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers. Mission failure. Host will become bald, and it will be irreversible. Mission progress. 6/30. Right at this moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded in Meg's mind. "Fuck." Meg almost blurted out. "System, your punishment for failure is too vicious, isn't it? What the hell is bald?" Meg rolled his eyes and said in his mind. "Saving a bald person is better than building a 7-story pagoda. All the best, host." The system encouraged before disappearing completely. Chapter 1153. Meg resisted the urge to hang the signboard with Master of Hair Growth at the door. He threw the signboard to a corner on the 3rd floor, adjusted his mood, and went downstairs. After breakfast, he sent Amy to school. When he went out, Meg specially observed the proportion of baldness among the customers in the queue. At a glance, people with hair loss who could be seen everywhere were rarely seen in the queue. Other than Adams, there were only 2 middle-aged customers. Hair loss is really depressing. Meg sighed as he pedaled his bicycle slowly with Amy on it. When they passed by the job agency, the boss, Chris, was watering the plants at the door. "Morning, Uncle Bird's nest," Amy greeted him with a smile. "Morning, little boss," Chris replied helplessly as he looked up. During this period of time, Mamie Restaurant had become the most popular restaurant in the entire Chaos City. He had also taken some time out to eat there once. Although the job agency had brought him quite a bit of income, it was still very painful for him to fork out a few hundred or even a few thousand copper coins for a meal. Hence, he had only gone once. Meg also nodded at Chris with a smile. His gaze stopped on his head for a while. What a nice bald head. It would be perfect if he could go and eat. Buddha jumps over the wall. Ding. Warning system, do not take the initiative to solicit customers. Otherwise, it will be regarded as a violation, and the mission will be deemed a failure. Before Meg could say anything, the system's voice had already sounded in Meg's mind. "System, aren't you going overboard? Good wine doesn't need to be afraid of deep alleys. Basic advertising is in line with the trade rules. What right do you have to stop me from advertising?" Meg raised his eyebrows. "Host, as a candidate for the god of cookery, how can you solicit customers on the street? This will seriously lower your status, and is not conducive to cultivating the god of cookery's character. You are discriminating against those ladies who use their bodies to earn money," Meg said sternly. "What did they do wrong? Aren't they also working people? I remember back then, there was a small alley where we lived. There were many young ladies living in the alley. They often stood at the door to enjoy the cool air. They were very hospitable and always invited me to their houses to play. They were such nice girls. Later, because there were too many people who wanted to raise the city standard, the alleys were gone, and so were the warm and hospitable ladies. Don't you think that's right?" Meg continued. "Isn't hospitality a compliment in the human language system? Then why were they chased away?" Searching for information, there was no required information in the database. The question is unsolvable. Enter learning mode. System learning. Meg was still waiting for the system's answer when a line of words silently floated through his mind. What a studious system. Meg raised his eyebrows and wondered how long it would take for the system to come out this time. "Uncle Bird's nest, why don't you come to our restaurant and have a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall? In that case, will your hair grow back?" Before Meg could speak, Amy asked curiously. "My hair will grow back." Chris's eyes instantly lit up. He looked at Amy in surprise and said, "Little boss, is what you said true? After eating that Buddha jumps over the wall, my hair will grow back." "Yes, there are already a few hairless uncles and big brothers who came to our restaurant to eat Buddha jumps over the wall, and had their hair grow back." Amy nodded and added, "However, Uncle Bird's nest, you have to come at night. Buddha jumps over the wall is only available at night." Okay. I'll definitely come." Chris nodded hurriedly. If there was something in this world that he cared about more than making money, it would probably be his thinning hair. Seeing the Mediterranean Sea slowly growing bigger, he protected the remaining golden hair on his head like it was a treasure. Suddenly hearing that there was a way to regrow his hair was really a surprise to him. Meg looked at Amy in surprise. He didn't expect that Amy had already completed the transaction before he even opened his mouth. From the looks of it, this little brat really had a business mind for precise marketing. Seeing how Chris couldn't wait to go to Amy's, this customer was basically included in the hair regrowth package. Meg pedaled his bicycle and continued to ride in the direction of the school. Holding Amy's hand, he walked into the school. It was indeed a place for intellectuals. Meg immediately saw a few bald heads and a few heads that were trying to probe the edges of the bald heads. Especially in the direction of the physics faculty, a few young people with receding hairlines were fiercely debating about something. As they shook their heads, their hair fluttered in the wind. The scene was quite shocking. This is really a rich resource bank. Meg's eyes lit up. It was a pity that there was no computer science faculty. Otherwise, all he had to do was run to the entrance of the school and shout, and the students and teachers of the computer science faculty would probably fill up the cafeteria. A backup plan had already appeared in Meg's mind. As soon as they entered the magic lab, Crassus looked at Amy with a smile and said, "After my discussion with Julian, if little Amy wants to take a break so much, we will also give you a long break. 5 days before and 5 days after Peace Day, for a total of 10 days. Really?" Amy's eyes lit up. "Of course it's true. When has Master ever lied to you?" Crassus nodded with a smile. "Thank you, Master Crassus." Amy threw herself into Crassus' arms, then turned to Meg and said happily, "Father, I can take a break too." "Yes, Amy can take a break too." Meg smiled. It seemed that Crassus and Julian still cared about Amy's wishes. Although she couldn't take a 30-day break like ordinary students, a 10-day break was still very rare. When they returned to the restaurant, it was time for the morning business. The news of Adam's giving the plaque in the morning had already spread. The rumor that the Buddha jumps over the wall could help with hair growth was verified again, and it had become a hot topic. Who didn't have 1 or 2 people who were suffering from hair loss? Since there was such a special medicine, even if it was a little expensive, it was still very recommended. After the morning business ended, the sun was shining brightly. Meg took the recliner out of the door, laid it down, and was about to take a nap under the sun. "Mr. Meg, I hope I didn't disturb your sunbathing." At this moment, a gentle and pleasant voice sounded. Meg opened his eyes and sat up. He looked at Gloria with a smile and shook his head. "It's okay, I just laid down." "Miss Gloria, is there anything you need from me?" "Yes, there's something I want to hear Mr. Meg's opinion on, so I abruptly came to disturb you." Gloria nodded. "Then let's sit over there and talk. I'll go get a pot of tea." Meg got up and gestured for Gloria to sit at the side while he turned around and went into the restaurant. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 1154. A pot of black tea was brewing on a small stove, and the warm winter sun shone down. Meg leaned comfortably on the wooden chair and looked at Gloria with a smile. "Miss Gloria, what do you want to talk to me about?" "It's like this. Because of my family, I'm still a director of the Aden Chamber of Commerce. But 2 days ago, my grandfather suddenly came to me and said that my Uncle Cyril wants to remove me at the end of the year's celebration in a few days. He's already contacted a lot of directors. Although I don't care about this so-called director position, my grandfather said that if I can't keep the director position with my own ability, then I'll be eliminated from the list of candidates. And if I can stay, the part of the family business that was previously allocated to me will become my permanent property. What do you think I should do?" Gloria looked at Meg helplessly. This is really a drama about the rich and powerful. Meg sighed in his heart. Although he was born into a rich and powerful family in his previous life, because he was the only child, there was no drama about fighting for family property. Because of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, other than Gloria, Meg didn't have a good impression of family Moreton. The powerful president and Louis Cyril, who couldn't afford to pay, weren't good people in his eyes. In the beginning, he made a great ambition to overthrow the Aden Chamber of Commerce and reset those unequal rules. Young Mistress Shear was one of the chess pieces that he had invested in this game, while young Mistress Gloria, who was gradually showing her talent in business, and was starting to test for the right to inherit the Moreton family, was his second backup. Of course, when he decided to help Gloria, he didn't think too much about it. He just thought of it as a little help to a friend and an angel investor. Now, suede clothing was developing rapidly. Under Meg's suggestion, the production line was improving day by day. The low efficiency of individual labor was evolving to the efficient division of labor and the assembly line. The productivity was also increasing. They had obtained a piece of land in the north of the city and were preparing to build a new garment factory. Gloria's talent and judgment in business operations won Meg's admiration. However, she was a little immature when it came to handling daily affairs. Judging from the change in your grandfather's attitude, there should be some changes in his views regarding the successor. If you can complete this mission, perhaps you can truly compete with your uncle on the same level as him. However, since he dared to bring this matter up directly with your grandfather, he must have contacted many of the directors who can vote. Moreover, he has been the sole heir of family Moreton for many years. There should be more people who think that he will become the family Moreton successor. Therefore, there's not much point in persuading the directors now. Your grandfather may be able to influence some of the directors and make them stand on the same level. However, in just a few days, you won't be able to produce results that will convince the directors. Meg analyzed. Then what should I do? Gloria stared at Meg and asked. It was because of this that she felt helpless and came to see Meg. Perhaps you can go and see Miss Hill. There are 4 major families in the Aden Chamber of Commerce. Other than family Moreton, the Buffett family is the most powerful family. If she can stand on your side, perhaps the result will be different. Meg said. Miss Hill. Gloria was slightly surprised. She shook her head and said, Miss Hill is on bad terms with my grandfather because of the election. She definitely won't stand on my side. How do you know if you don't try? Meg said with a smile as he poured a cup of black tea and placed it in front of Gloria. Gloria looked at Meg's encouraging eyes. After a moment of silence, she nodded hard and said, Yes, I will try. Even if I fail, I have to at least give it a try. After drinking a cup of black tea, Gloria left. Meg drank tea alone for a while. He didn't feel sleepy anymore. He put away the tea set and rode out on his bicycle. He hadn't received any news from the elves for 2 days. Looks like the night elves aren't doing well. I wonder if Phyllis and the others are doing well. Meg walked out of the alley and changed back into his own clothes. He frowned. He had just spent a lot of gold coins to exchange for the latest news. The wind forest had surrounded the catacombs where the night elves were. The attack and defense of the catacombs had already been fought several times. Although the night elves had the advantage of the terrain, the wind forest had more soldiers and powerhouses. Now, they were completely relying on Irina's powerful individual strength to support the last line of defense of the night elves. Although the gnomes had lent the catacombs to the night elves, they had no intention of intervening in this war. They hadn't given any help to the night elves. The catacombs were now like an isolated island. All the forces had basically assumed that this rebellion would be quelled soon. Even with Irina's guidance, the night elves were still too weak to shake the rule of the wind forest. I have to find a way to give Irina more help. Meg muttered to himself. He rode his bicycle back and stopped at the blacksmith shop next door. When he entered the blacksmith shop, the sound of blacksmithing came from behind. Mr. Mac, why are you here? Meg had just walked to the door of the forging room when Mobai looked up and saw him. He was a little surprised. About the cannon, I thought of something recently, so I wanted to talk to you about it, Meg said with a smile. Mobai's eyes lit up when he heard that. He put the heavy hammer in his hand aside and said with a smile, Okay, then let's talk outside. I also have some questions that I want to ask you. According to Mr. Meg's previous suggestion, I made a cannon. But for some reason, the cannonballs often explode inside the barrel, causing damage to the barrel. It can't be fired and can't cause any damage. Also, the cannonball's power can't be increased within the limited volume. I estimated that a cannonball exploding at close range can only cause a fatal threat to a level 3 magic beast, Mobai said with a frown as he spread out a blueprint. Meg took a few glances at the blueprint and asked, "Where's the barrel?" "In the workshop outside the city. I was worried that there would be danger during the experiment, so I built a workshop on a plain about 5 kilometers away from Chaos City," Mobai answered. "If it's convenient, bring me there in the afternoon. The cannon has very high requirements for the barrel. The reason for the explosion can only be found after looking at it. I also have some ideas about how to increase the cannonball's power, but let's talk about it after we see the cannon," Meg said to Mobai. "Alright, then I'll bring Mr. Mac there in the afternoon." Mobai quickly nodded. Chapter 1155. After lunch, Meg followed Mobai to the outskirts of the city. Mobai's cannon workshop was built on a plain 10 miles away from the city. The surroundings were desolate, and the yellow soil was everywhere. A yellow soil courtyard stood out from the rest. Mobai stopped the horse-drawn carriage and looked at Mag with a smile as he said, "I've bought this entire plot of land, so no one will come here on a regular basis, so I don't have to worry about conducting any experiments. It's pretty good." Back in the day, the pioneers of 2 bombs and 1 star also traded for the world nuclear power in such a harsh environment. Meg stood on the shaft of the carriage and looked around. The seriously deserted plain did feel like the Great Northwest. "Come in." Mobai tied the horse and opened the big lock on the courtyard door. He pushed the door open and walked in. Meg jumped off the carriage and followed him into the courtyard. As soon as they entered the courtyard, the smell of gunpowder hit their nostrils. There were piles of iron everywhere in the courtyard, and there were 2 cannons in the corner. They looked a little like the red coat cannon. "Mr. Mac, look, these are the cannons I made. These 2 were made 2 days ago. I made some improvements. The barrels were damaged before, so they are now scrap metal." Mobai led Meg to the cannons in the corner. Although Meg graduated from mechanical design, he did not study firearms manufacturing. He did not have any in-depth research on high-grade cannons. He could only give some suggestions on the manufacturing process of these 2 cannons from a mechanical perspective. He changed the quenching method to increase the heat resistance of the barrel, polished the inside of the barrel, and thickened the barrel. Furthermore, Mag had further improved the structure of the cannon. It had changed from the primitive firing mode to a firing mode with a firing mode. When he was in class, his teacher used a World War II German cannon as a case study. He still remembered the blueprint and parameters. As for whether the craftsmanship could reach the standard, that was Mobai's problem. "What an exquisite design. Mr. Mac, you are a genius." Mobai looked at the new blueprint and exclaimed. "I'm just standing on the shoulders of my predecessors." Meg shook his head with a smile. "Is there someone else researching cannons?" Mobai asked as he looked at Meg curiously. "For now, it should only be you and me." Meg shook his head. "Mr. Mac is actually willing to show me such a complete concept. I really don't know how to thank you." Mobai held the blueprint and couldn't put it down. Meg looked at Mobai with a serious expression and said, "I can give you the blueprint for free, but I want to make a deal. Once this cannon is successfully developed, you can only accept my order, and you can't give the blueprint to a third person." "Mr. Mac wants cannons too." Mobai was stunned and looked at Meg in surprise. If the peace treaty can't be signed, the world may fall into chaos again. I'm just an ordinary person, so I need to have some means of self-defense, Meg said with a smile. Is that so? Don't worry. With Mr. Mac's culinary skills, there will definitely be many people who will protect you. Besides, aren't there Mr. Crassus and Mr. Julian? Mulby smiled and said, but I agree to all your conditions. You just have to tell me how much you want in the future. My goal is that evil dragon. I don't want to make money from cannons. Meg nodded slightly. He chose to give the cannon technology to Mulby because of this. In addition to cannons, I want to customize a batch of landmines from you. Meg continued. An hour later, Meg returned to the restaurant in Mulby's horse-drawn carriage. Mulby returned to the workshop, and said to Lulu, who was swinging her hammer vigorously, "Blockhead, stop forging. Go back earlier today. Stop this batch of orders first. From tomorrow onwards, follow me to the workshop outside the city. There's a new batch of orders that need to be done urgently." Okay. Lulu wiped her sweat, and then forged the piece of metal in her hand into a sword embryo before putting down the hammer and leaving. Is what you said true? Adam's hair grew because he ate a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall from that restaurant. Adams even specially gave him a plaque today. In Gould Manor, Charney looked at the middle-aged man with a shocked expression. Yes. I saw young Master Adams give that plaque to Mr. Mac from Mamie's with my own eyes this morning. The words Master of Hair Growth were written on it. The middle-aged man quickly nodded and then muttered, also, I heard another piece of news. That the Buddha jumps over the wall can not only help with hair growth, but it also has the effect of strengthening those knights. Yesterday, a first-tier knight broke through to the second tier after drinking a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall. You're saying that Adams could break through to the fourth tier in one night because he drank that Buddha jumps over the wall? Charney raised his voice and ridiculously said, how can there be such a soup in this world? Wouldn't it be a miracle medicine? Seems like you must have never heard of Mamie's. That is a rather legendary restaurant. Mr. Mac's food is not only delicious, but also has some unusual magical effects. For example, the tofu pudding, which is regarded as a holy item for beauty by the women in Chaos City, not only can it moisturize the skin and remove wrinkles, but it can also remove some scars and spots that even magic casters can't do anything about. The effects of this Buddha jumps over the wall have already been verified by a few customers who have eaten it, so it shouldn't be wrong, that middle-aged man said with a smile. He had an inexplicable confidence when he talked about Mr. Mac. Mamie's. I didn't expect there to be such a magical restaurant, Charney said thoughtfully. Yesterday's incident had really embarrassed him. However, since things had already come to this, and he had already made a promise of 10 years, he didn't regret giving Adams another 10 years. He didn't want Adams to hate him for the rest of his life. The family Moreton was a good example. He could still afford to wait for another 10 years. However, he was indeed very curious about how Adams made his hair grow. It was just that the situation yesterday was too awkward, and he couldn't bring himself to ask Adams. However, this gentleman had provided him with a very valuable piece of information. It was never too late to grow hair, no matter what age one was. Charney reached out to shake hands with that middle-aged man with a smile. Thank you for providing me with an important piece of information. I remember that you talked about a collaboration with my secretary previously, right? You were talking to me about your plan. All right, everyone, go back earlier today. Kreese urged the employees to knock off before it was even 5 p.m. What's wrong with the miser today? Why is he letting us knock off so early? The employees couldn't help but mumble as they watched Kreese rush away. Chapter 1156. At the entrance of the Mercenary Guild, a young knight showed off his biceps to his teammates and punched the testing machine at the side. Bang! There was a muffled sound. A red line rose slowly and stopped at the second-level position. Did you see that? I ate a serving of Buddha jumps over the wall the day before yesterday, and then I broke through. Look, I am a genuine second-level knight now, the young knight said excitedly. Damn! You really broke through. Really? You can even break through. You are the person who was deemed as a loser by the captain. This machine isn't broken, right? The mercenaries were stunned for a moment and looked at the red line with astonishment. Some of them even checked the testing machine. It's true. I haven't told anyone about this yet, the young knight said with certainty. He then turned to look at the scarred knight who was standing at the side and said with a smile, Boss, can you bring me along for the next mission? I have been sweeping the floor for 3 months. When you have stabilized your realm, you can go on missions with us. The scarred knight looked at the red line and turned to leave. Yay! The young knight clenched his fist excitedly. He finally made it. Boss, where are we going to eat tonight? The mercenaries asked as they followed him. Mamies, the scarred knight said calmly, but his eyes lit up with passion. Are we going to eat that Buddha jumps over the wall, too? Can we really break through after eating it? The mercenaries' eyes lit up when they heard that, and they started to ask the young knight about the Buddha jumps over the wall. The magical effects of Buddha jumps over the wall quickly spread in the hair loss circle and night circle. Regardless of whether it was true or not, it still aroused the desire of many people to check it out. Oh my God, Mr. Mac's business is so good that it's simply inhumane. Chris thought he had arrived quite early, but when he saw the long line of more than 200 people at the entrance, he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Looking ahead, Chris could see that there were people wearing the uniforms of the Great Temple and the City Lord's castle everywhere. He didn't think too much about it, and went straight to the end of the line. For the sake of his hair, what's the big deal? A luxurious horse-drawn carriage stopped at the entrance of the restaurant. The coachman opened the door, and Charney walked out. He was stunned to see the long line at the entrance, and asked in surprise, Why are there so many people? You might not know this, but Amy's is now the most popular restaurant in Chaos City. There are hundreds of people lining up to eat there every day, and business has always been booming. The middle-aged man who had previously informed him of the news walked out and said with a smile, Sir, we're a little late. Let's go to the back and line up. Line up? Charney frowned, shook his head, and said, I never wait for anyone. How much does it cost to enter directly? Pay the money and we can go in directly, or we can queue at the front. You can't do that. The middle-aged man quickly tugged at Charney's sleeve, and nervously said, According to the rules of this restaurant, you have to line up if you want to eat in the restaurant. If you cut the line, you will be blacklisted, and you won't be able to enter in advance even if you pay. There are so many rules in this restaurant. Could it be that they have someone backing them? Even I can't cut the line. Charney frowned, and said with displeasure. The middle-aged man softly said, Look, the 2 people at the front of the line. The one on the left with a white beard is the Lord of Fire, Crassus. The one on the right is the Lord of Ice, Julian. Look further back, that's the Deputy Lord of the Great Temple. The lady in the middle on the left is the City Lord's daughter, and the one behind her is the City Lord's wife. Further back, all right, let's queue up. Charney interrupted him with a complicated expression. He alighted from the horse-drawn carriage, and walked towards the back of the line. He saw many familiar faces in that line, and each of them had a higher status and power than the other. He really couldn't cut the line. What kind of freaking restaurant was this? Even the City Lord's wife, who rarely went out, was in the line. Furthermore, this boss was really something. There were so many big shots lining up outside, but he just closed the door and made them wait. As long as one was from the Norland continent, they would have heard of the rumors about those two legendary great magic casters. Mr. Mac's daughter is the disciple of Lord Crassus and Lord Julian, the middle-aged man added. They really have two powerful backers, Charney lamented. With the protection of these two great gods, no one would dare to create trouble here. Ding! Yabamiya opened the door, and hung a notice on the door before going back in. Hair Care Day activity. The restaurant will be selling 25 servings of Buddha Jumps Over the Wall to customers with hair loss problems. Please show your hair loss symptoms to the waiter when you order. The customer standing in the front row read it out loud. Hair Care Day. What kind of festival is that? Why haven't I heard of it before? Mr. Mac is too heartwarming, isn't he? I was worried that I wouldn't be able to eat it today. Isn't this a little unfair to people like us who don't have hair loss? If that's the case, Buddha Jumps Over the Wall can really make hair regrow. That's too awesome. The customers started discussing when they heard that. Those who came for the Buddha Jumps Over the Wall were elated. They were worried that they wouldn't be able to eat it. Seems like this Buddha Jumps Over the Wall is quite popular. Charney suddenly became nervous. He craned his neck to look in front, and counted how many bald heads there were in his heart. Father, why are you here? Just then, a voice sounded from the side. Charney was stunned. He turned to look at Adams, who had suddenly appeared beside him, and smiled awkwardly. However, he immediately pointed to the middle-aged businessman behind him, and said, "We are here to discuss business. I heard that this restaurant is good, so I came over to try it." Adams, why are you here too? I often come to this restaurant to eat, and I plan to eat here tonight, Adams said with a smile. Charney smiled, and said, I see. Then eat with us. We haven't had a meal together for some time. I won't disturb your business discussion, right? Adams was a little hesitant. It's all right, young Master Adams. We have already discussed it. It's my honor to be able to eat together, that middle-aged man said with a smile. All right then. I will line up behind you. Adams nodded and stood behind them. Welcome to Mamie's, Meg said with a smile as he opened the restaurant's door at 5:00 sharp. The customers walked in one after another, and looked at the messages that kept popping up in the omniscient door. There were customers who were affected by different degrees of hair loss, and a smile appeared on his face. He then glanced at the system learning message that kept popping up in his mind, and his smile became even brighter. Chapter 1157. The effect of the notice on Hair Care Day was very obvious. It gave the hair loss customers who were originally on the fence a reassurance pill. Although it was a bit painful to spend 10,000 copper coins, compared to the rebirth of beautiful hair, it was nothing. Miss Mia, look at my hair loss. My hairline has receded by half a finger. Miss Mia, that's nothing. Look at the top of my head. I can even raise fishes. Miss Mia, look at my bald head. Isn't it big and round? The customers began to show off their methods to prove that they were really losing their hair. Yabamiya was stunned. Some people looked normal, but half of their hair might be fake. The 25 bowls of Buddha Jumps Over the Wall that were reserved for hair loss patients were quickly sold out. Meg made 2 pots of Buddha Jumps Over the Wall today. The remaining bowls were served on a first-come, first-served basis. I heard that you have a type of soup that can increase one's strength greatly after drinking it. Is there really such a soup? Give me 8 or 10 bowls first. A rough-looking knight with a big beard sat down and looked at Mia. Yabamiya flipped open the menu and placed it in front of the knight. She smiled and said, Our restaurant only has 1 bowl of Buddha Jumps Over the Wall. However, I am not sure if it can increase one's strength greatly after drinking it. This is the menu. you can take a look at it. Each person can only buy one bowl of Buddha Jumps Over the Wall. If you want, I can order it for you. Only one bowl. Lev frowned and looked at the menu. Buddha Jumps Over the Wall cost 10,000 copper coins. Lev blinked and made sure that he didn't count 2 zeros too much. He looked up at Mia and said, "Is there a mistake in the menu?" "There is no mistake in the menu." Mia shook her head. Erm. Lev touched his pocket and revealed an awkward expression. He hesitated and said, "Can I buy half a bowl?" Mia shook her head. "Sorry, this restaurant can't sell half a serving of food." Lev's expression changed. He only had about 5,000 copper coins in his pocket. Who would carry so much money with them when they went out for a meal? Furthermore, he had just returned from a mercenary mission and heard about this from the guild. He had been stuck at level 5 for 4 years and had no hope of breaking through, so he wanted to give it a try immediately. Then, "Can I buy on credit here? I'll leave this sword here, and I'll come and get it tomorrow." Lev thought for a while, took off his sword, and looked at Mia. "I'm sorry, but Mamis only accepts cash. We don't accept credit or collateral." Mia shook her head and said with a smile, "Sure, you can take a look at the other dishes on the menu. They are also very delicious." If this was another restaurant, Lev would have been furious by now. However, this waitress had a smile on her face the whole time, and her expression and speech were very pleasant. Not only did he not get angry, but he also felt guilty that he did not bring enough money and cause trouble for her. Lev reluctantly retracted his gaze from the Buddha Jumps Over the Wall and looked at the other dishes on the menu. Then, he casually ordered a portion of red braised pork and a small portion of grilled fish. "Miss Mia, we want 6 servings of Buddha Jumps Over the Wall." The young knight who was bragging to his teammates at the entrance of the guild smiled and waved his hand. "Oh my God! This Buddha Jumps Over the Wall costs 10,000 copper coins per serving." A team member casually flipped open the menu and looked at the price tag. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. When the other mercenaries heard this, they also stretched their heads over and looked at the price tag. All of them revealed looks of astonishment. Their mercenary group could only be considered as a small mercenary group. They usually accepted missions that were not very dangerous and difficult. Therefore, their commission was naturally not high. Moreover, most of them loved wine and would usually go to the gambling den to play a few rounds. It was already good enough that they had some money for wine. How could they take out so much money to drink a bowl of soup, even if it could increase their strength? The leader of the mercenary group looked at the menu and hesitated. Today is my treat to celebrate my successful breakthrough. Everyone can order whatever you want to eat. Every dish in this restaurant is the best delicacy, the young knight said with a smile. Bowls of Buddha Jumps Over the Wall were served to the customers. The restaurant was filled with the wonderful aroma. Did my hair grow out a little? Oh my God! My hair grew out. I broke through. The alopecia patients and knights exclaimed from time to time in the restaurant. Although the restaurant prohibited noise, most of the customers could still smile or give their blessings for such a happy event. Another one broke through. This Buddha Jumps Over the Wall can really help people break through. Lev stretched his neck and looked around. He did not even care about the delicious red braised pork in front of him. He was surprised and anxious. Can you leave a bowl of Buddha Jumps Over the Wall for me? I will go back to get the money now. I will be back soon, Lev said sincerely as he raised his hand to signal Mia to come over. I'm sorry, sir. Today's Buddha Jumps Over the Wall is sold out. If you want to eat it, please come over earlier tomorrow night, Mia said with a smile. It's sold out. Lev's eyes widened. This is a dish that costs 10,000 copper coins per bowl. It sold out in such a short time. How rich are these fellows? Yes, please enjoy your meal. Mia nodded and walked to the next customer. Adams, can you help me take a look and see if my hair has grown out? A little. Charney moved his head toward Adams agitatedly. Yes, your hair has grown out a little. Adams nodded with a smile as he looked at the little hairs on Charney's bald head. That's great. I'm finally going to have hair again. Charney clenched his fists excitedly. His face was filled with ecstasy as he hugged Adams and patted his back. Then, he stood up and hugged the businessman who came with him with a bright smile on his face. Adams looked at Charney in shock. This was the first time he saw him so happy. It turned out that his father, who had always been bald, actually wanted hair as well, but he didn't know about it. It seemed like he wasn't a good son. He should communicate more with him. Charney nodded. Helping alopecia patients. Mission progress, 29/30. 30/30. A smile appeared on Mag's face as he looked at the progress bar. Without the system as a stumbling block, this mission had been completed rather easily. Ding! System learning completed. Download of 1024T resources completed. Host, you are so coquettish. Just then, the system's voice suddenly sounded, you're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.